All right, well, we might as well get started. So I'd like to call this Citizens Advisory Committee to order. My name is Tim Gaudet. I'll be chairing the committee. I'd like to invite you to stand so we say pledge of allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and welcome to all of you, and thank you on behalf of the residents of the city for volunteering and bringing your talent, your wisdom, and your skills to bear on knotty problems that we have to deal with in our. This is a great city. You all know this. We have awards coming every 6 months of one kind or another. And the most recent one was the 13th hottest housing market in the country. We're in the top 10 in virtually every aspect of Michigan living. And so, as you know, we have a gem here on our hands. Prior generations have invested a lot of money in this city, a lot of time, a lot of talent. They built the infrastructure that we enjoy together. But like every gem, the gem needs to be polished from time to time. The weight of years has immobilized our ice arena. Everyone is aware of the deteriorating roads and the constant breaks in our water system. City Hall costs a fortune over there to heat and to cool. And it seems there is no way to stop the rain coming into a couple of offices on a rainy day. Deferred maintenance can only go on so long until it undermines the quality of life and begins to tarnish the gym. City Council is asking you, as a representative sample of the people, to take a look at these major issues, to think about recommendations regarding them that might work, that might be ideal, that might be less than ideal, and figure out a way that we might fund these needs. And so we appreciate your time, we appreciate your energy, but most of all, we appreciate your commitment to the city we all call home. So I wish you the very best in this endeavor. City staff will be available to you to answer any questions, to help you understand any sticky issues, and also engineering reports over the period of the last couple of years will be available to you to help you as you go on this journey. I thank you and wish you well on this journey. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Welcome, everybody. I do want to say my utmost thank you to each of you for stepping up. When the city called, the city put out a request for citizens to join this committee. You guys and many others stepped up to heed that call. For those who have not had a chance to meet yet, my name is Baumgarten. I'm the new city manager as of earlier this year. So I am really excited to work with this group. I think in a lot of ways we're moving forward with some new initiatives, and it's a new day in Berkley. And that's really being kicked off today with this group. So I am very optimistic about what's going to come out of these meetings. The challenge is not small, but I've been continually impressed with those of you I have met, and I'm really excited to work with those that I have not yet had a chance to meet. So the big issues that sit in front of you today are, of course, the continuing status of our community center, our city's infrastructure, including our roads and our water main, and then also our municipal facilities, such as the building across the way there, our city hall. Attached to that is, of course, our original city hall, dating all the way to 1928. Those of you who have not been in there, the space is not well used, and there's real potential to move forward here. So we're going to be reviewing a lot of information with you today. We have brought some of our crack team of city staff. We have our Parks Rec director, we have our DPW director, we have our finance director, we have the city's engineer who worked with us on a building assessment back in 2014. Patrick's here from Stantech. So you're going to go through a series of slides today and really lay out where our status quo is, and then ask a couple things of this group as far as how aggressive we want to be in meetings moving forward, how to prioritize some of the city's issues, and where to really is the best way forward and utilizing the city's resources. So with that being said, I again welcome you and look forward to seeing you guys work through and accomplish the tasks at hand. Thank you.
Okay. As I mentioned earlier, my name is Tim Gaudet. I've been a Berkley resident for about 16 years. I want to take a few minutes and have us all introduce ourselves. I'll start with our vice chair, which is Melanie Stevens, sitting right up front here.
Hello.
I'm Gary Borg, resident of Berkley.
I'm Josephine Gore, and I'm a resident of Berkeley for 50 years.
I was going to ask you how long. You didn't say.
This is my city.
I'm Ross Gavin, also a resident, new within the last year and a half or so.
I'm Dave Hurst. I've been a resident for just about 10 years.
My name is Danny Husky. I was pretty much born and raised in my dad's house. I've been here for, I'd say, about 40 years now.
My name is Kayla Mylan. I've been here for about 3, going on 4 years.
I'm Rosia Nikolai. I've been a resident for 18 years. I'm Carla Osborne, and I've been a resident for 8 years.
Roman Prescott, about 8 or so years.
Paul Shkreli lived here 3 years.
And I'm Nicole Smithson, and I snuck in after the pledge. So I've been here 29 years. Dan, I'm sad that you beat me. I was like, take everyone but just me.
Well, welcome to everybody. Thank you for, yes. Oh, that's right. Lori Robertson is on the phone with us.
I am Lori Robertson, and I've been resident for 43 years.
So rivaling Josephine. Well, thanks.
I'm on her heels. I'm right here.
That's right. From Florida, no less.
Oh, Vicky Buffalo.
Well, thanks for each of you, or to each of you, for being part of this committee. It looks like we have a good cross-section of residents, and I trust we'll be able to come to some good, solid recommendations to be able to present to the City Council. As you all know, our task is to study, review, and visit, as well as prioritize certain infrastructure issues facing the city, and to explore funding options while keeping in mind what's best for the city. We're a working advisory committee and not a decision-making or policy-making group. And my and Melanie's role is to keep us on task, keep us focused in a constructive way so that we can achieve the objectives and meet the timeline, which is to have recommendations ready to present to Council by the March 20th Council meeting. I ask that committee members deliberate here and at our meetings as a committee and not outside or through social media. We're not all going to agree with each other throughout this process, and it's some of those disagreements and discussions that are going to be very helpful to us and that we need to consider fairly and come up with new and hopefully creative ideas. We're not here to lobby or be lobbied, and therefore outside participation in these deliberations and meetings will be that which is requested by this committee, and it will come from city staff or other advisors that will be participating. Again, I want to thank each committee member for their time and their talents. I'm sure we're going to learn a lot, and I hope that each of us can keep an open mind and embrace this process for the benefit of the city and all of us as residents. So with that, I want to hand it over to the staff. They put together a great presentation for us, and also remind everybody, if you have cell phones, please turn them on vibrate or turn the sound off.
Beyond button works every time. All right. Jim is absolutely correct. We do want to present to you some great information. This information is put together by a multitude of city staff, but most of all, I'd like to thank Darchelle for being the focal point and putting together this presentation. You're going to hear from a lot of voices today, but the document here is a big credit to Darchelle and her abilities in managing all of this information and keeping everybody on task. So our objective today begins with reviewing all of the city's infrastructure needs. We are going to have a lot of information for you today. We're going to be going through different department heads. We're going to be going through a lot of different slides. If you have any questions, just for the sake of flow, there's a chance we'll probably answer them at a separate point. So just scroll them down real quick and we'll go through a big Q&A period right at the end. And so make sure that no stone is left unturned for this portion. Hopefully, through the presentation, through the questions, we're beginning a good understanding of the challenges and the financial impacts that the city currently faces. These answers are not easy ones. There's a lot to be done. There's a lot to weigh. And you'll see the running theme through all of this is the question that we'll ask at the end there, and that is, what is best for Berkley? Again, we review a lot of the data that's going to come along with this. We're going to throw a lot at you. If you need something repeated, you don't have to wait to the end to repeat it. We'll certainly go back to something if need be. Again, but if you have a question, hopefully we answer another portion. You'll see the sub-points underneath here as to the funding strategies for roads, water, and municipal building improvements. We talked about the community center and the ice arena as sort of separate from the rest of the buildings. And then all the buildings together, including, again, let's say our city hall, current city hall, and our historic city hall. As Tim mentioned, during these meetings, if you can stay focused, listen actively, respect differing opinions. This is going to be a forum for conversation. So when you get to the end and you do want to ask a question, don't be intimidated. And please do your best not to unintentionally imitate one of your fellow committee members, because if you're thinking it, chances are somebody else is thinking it, and it's a good chance to get it out and get it talked about. Most of all, on behalf of all of us who live this stuff every day, we hope you can have fun. I'm terrible at telling jokes, so I will try to keep those to a minimum. But if anybody else in here wants to take up that role, then we certainly will do that. The City Council every year, along with their budget documents, accepts a set of core values. And you'll see we put those right up front here. Most of all, we're looking at community and cooperation in this building tonight. And how do we work together as a community? How do we find out what is best for Berkley? You'll see a little bit of information about those. Those are in your packet. So it's a little word there on what we've accepted in our budget document as what it means to be Berkley. All right, jumping into the meat of the issue. To begin, our infrastructures wasn't all installed at once, and our problems didn't all develop at once. These issues have developed over several different decades. As the mayor said earlier, the last 10 years put us in the mode of deferred maintenance because, if you recall, they're some of the worst 10 years that any of us, who perhaps hasn't lived in the city for 50 years, had endured. They were the worst economic times. How that specifically affected municipalities is when housing values and when property values plummeted, the city's main revenue source plummeted along with them. So we had to, in order to get by, in order to keep from cutting a lot of the programs that we depend on as residents, we sort of put off making an improvement here or there. And then here or there became nearly everywhere. And now we're at the point where we need to answer some very tough questions. Each year, now that during that period and now even moving forward, each department is responsible for putting together a capital improvements program. It's how do we physically impact what's under our umbrella? How does Department of Public Works improve the roads? How do they do the water mains? How do they do the sanitary sewer? How does the Recreation Department improve parks? How does it do sometimes the ice arena? Likewise, City Hall falls under the same thing. So we call this our capital improvements plan, and that's a good one to sort of keep in the memory bank because we're going to be talking a lot about our capital improvements plan. Capital in this sense, it's not like the economic term where we talk about cash. Capital is a hard good. It's a physical item. So it's a copy machine. It's a computer screen. It's all of those things come under the idea of capital improvements planning. So these are sometimes for a short range, but they can last as long as 10 years. And it's good to look out that far ahead because you can't let these things be a surprise to you year in and year out. You need to know that in 2 years I'm going to need a vehicle. Our server is going to be near the end of its useful life. So that's why we do these things in 5 to 6 year bursts typically, but we're always looking pretty far down the road there, sometimes as far as a decade. Every year we update this item. Every year we go through a process where each department submits their needs and sort of a current status of their existing capital items. Since 2009, capital improvements were delayed. As we said, this is because the city was losing revenues year in, year out, just like you were losing the value in your home. All of us were losing the value in our home. And again, we opted for services as opposed to paint jobs and sometimes HVAC systems and sometimes a stretch of pavement. We wanted to make sure that for the average Berkley resident, you didn't notice anything different as far as your services go, and that was the goal. That's how we maintained our financial stability during the worst of it. In 2012, if you recall, we had to ask the voters for some additional resources. Funds were used for 3 very specific items: public safety, DPW, the library, basically anything that comes under the general fund, and that's another term that you're going to be getting well acquainted with, was the general fund. This millage is subject to another one of the key words of the evening, which is the Headley rollback. I think we get to the Headley. You expect Headley another? Yeah. So there's a handout in your binders you have in front of you. That's going to be a wealth of resources, a wealth of knowledge that you're going to take with you tonight. But basically, for those that were around in '78, the Headley Amendment states simply that each time a city gains value in taxes, there is a calculation that caps the number of mills that we can levy on a community. So when you say, hey, the city had a 3% increase in taxable value this year, we're starting to gain. What that ends up is, after the Headley calculation, this year specifically ended up being less than 1% of an increase in our revenues. So costs are unlimited, revenues are capped very specifically by 2 items that you're going to hear more about, and that's the Headley Amendment, and that's Proposal A from 1994. So the steady decline in state funding also has played a key role in bringing us to where we are today. The state has, for the most part, divested in communities and for trust. The state, they need to make their bottom line as well. At least that's what they'll tell us. Their spending has continued to go up while their investment in communities has gone down. There's 2 forms of revenue sharing really 3 forms of revenue sharing that we get from the state. One specific to the roads. We get that through Public Act 51. And then the 2 other kinds that are handed to us as a general fund contribution are a statutory and a constitutional revenue sharing. Constitutional revenue sharing is guaranteed, as it sounds, by the Michigan Constitution, and has to do with sales tax. So we get a portion of the sales tax every year. Above that, the Michigan legislature allots each year a statutory amount. That's really what they have used in order to balance the state's budgets, sometimes editorializing a little bit on the backs of communities like us. So we've seen a steady decline there, and it's only just now starting to level out between the statutory constitutional revenue sharing, or statutory revenue sharing. So what we're left with right now is we don't have a sustainable method for funding roads and water. What we tend to do is we'll save up just a little bit at a time and do a big project. This year, if you're familiar with the condition of Harvard Road between Cass and Woodward, we're going to be adjusting both the water and the road portion of that project. It's about a $2.3 million project, but it's over 10 years in the making. So think about what the condition of each of our roads, where they're going, and we're doing a project every 10 years, big projects, but not enough to keep up with it. So that's why we say we don't have a sustainable method for funding roads. It would be nice to do something every year so we can keep up with the the way that our roads are coming apart, just because in Michigan, the freeze-thaw cycle, we're really up against the useful life of asphalt and concrete both. Same thing is true for water. We find through our rates a little bit of money each year, but we don't have a sustained capital improvement project that's associated with water mains. That's one of the reasons why you'll see the city's utility bills are some of the lowest in the area, is because others have opted to fund capital improvements through the rates and do projects each year. And Derrick is going to be talking in far more detail about that. So 2014, now coming forward in the timeline, an ad hoc committee was appointed to consider viable options for roads and water. They've been working up to this point and have prepared a lot of the information you're going to see in front of you up until March 20th. But it really came to the point where they needed a citizens committee. Likewise, in 2014, we also did a municipal facility assessment, which I believe is also in the packet. Yes, it's in the packet as well. And so this information, as you take it home, you can find it. You can also find an electronic copy on the city's website, which is searchable, and you can find some keywords that way. But that really went through each facility and said, here's where it's lacking structurally, from an energy efficiency standpoint, and just from things like lets water in, as the mayor alluded to earlier. Great study, great resource. It's a little lengthy, but again, like I said, it's searchable, and we can focus in on the 3 buildings that we're going to be having conversations about the most. So the items to consider for roads and water improvements. Should we reconstruct fewer roads? Should we rehabilitate or resurface more roads? Should we focus on infrastructure, water infrastructure needs? And then the biggest question of all always comes down to, how do we finance ongoing repairs needed for these improvements? So when we talk about reconstructing fewer roads, that is talking about not just putting a new layer of asphalt on top, but that's going all the way down to the subgrade and building up from there, so that we build a road for 20 years as opposed to resurfacing roads, which 10 years sometimes. If we have a good stretch of mild winters. Both are appropriate depending on the situation, but again, this is what we're going to be asking of this group. And then also focusing on water infrastructure needs. Hopefully everybody's on the email system that we have here. You'll hear from us a couple times a month on where the latest water main break is. It seems like it's been quite a bit this year. You'll see some numbers that back that up. But we know the pipes underneath the ground need to be addressed. The problem is, how do we do it, to what extent each year, and how do we lock that in with our road improvement program so that we're never putting good pavement over bad pipes. All right, so it's likewise on the municipal buildings. Should we continue as we're going, which we're going to be giving you a lot of information on the condition of our buildings. In a lot of cases, we just don't know how much longer we can do that for. And so we tear them down. What would that cost us in some sense, especially when we're talking about perhaps our community center and our ice arena? Are we open to eliminating some items there? If so, which ones? Should we be looking at the idea of gutting and renovating the interior of these buildings? Should we be looking at starting from scratch and building something new for the next 50 years? And again, it all comes back down to the last bullet point of how do we finance that. So the gauntlet's been laid down for this evening. So now you're going to go through a series of different departments, the first of which we're going to be hearing from Derrick Schueller, our DPW director on our road and water infrastructure.
Hi, I'm Derrick Schueller. I'm your DPW director. I've been in Berkley now for just over 5 years. I'm a civil engineer, went to the University of Michigan, and have been serving communities in southeast Michigan now for almost 20 years, which is pretty amazing. So I've bounced around a little bit, worked on the private consulting side, designing roads, water mains, and I've been in public works now for getting close to 10 years. So that's a little bit of my background. But today I'm going to talk about really two different things, roads and water infrastructure. Now you may be saying, well, what about sewer infrastructure? And not that sewer needs some attention, but just quickly I can summarize, we've been lining sewer pipes for well over 20 years in Berkley, which is a wonderful thing, something that many of our neighbors can't say they do. Spending several $100,000 every year to structurally line pipes, which means you don't have to dig it up. You can actually put a new pipe inside of the old one. The old one can basically deteriorate and you've got a new pipe in place. It certainly doesn't mean we're ignoring sewer, but we've established a pattern of regular sewer maintenance that we're very proud of. We received a SAW grant, so we're moving forward along those lines. You'll hear more about that, but just so you know, the big three, if you will, roads, water, and sewer. I'm not going to spend much time with sewer today, but I'm going to really focus on water, main, and roads. So the big one, to me, is water infrastructure. And if you were to ask me what, if I had my perfect scenario, it would be that we're replacing a half mile, 3/4 of a mile of water main every single year. We have 50 miles of roadway in Berkley, which means we have about 50 miles of public water main, 50 miles of sewer. So 50 miles is quite a bit, and most of the water infrastructure was installed in the 1920s, 30s, 40s, and has really reached its life expectancy. We certainly have mains that are approaching 100 years old. There's cast iron, so I'll show you some pictures later. It's unlined cast iron is what we primarily have, which is a brittle pipe, and a pipe that tends to collect a lot of sediment inside, which I'll show you as well. Water main breaks. I hope everybody's signed up for the e-blast, and I think that was a good idea for us to sort of get the news out when we do have a water main break. And just because you don't live on the street, but the break may be on, you could experience cloudy water, which is a frequent occurrence when we do have a break. We have to operate valves. Changing that flow direction stirs up the main. It's not unusual to have cloudy water, so it's always a good idea to pay attention to those. If you live near a break, it's not unusual to have cloudy water. So we're dealing with since I started 5 years ago, I've been tracking all the water main breaks actually in my office. So if you ever come to visit, I've got a big map in my office where we've converted that to an electronic map, which is in your binder. I would encourage you to take a look at that. It's one of the first maps in there. You'll see a map of the city of Berkley with all the breaks over the last 5 years. And what you can take away from that map, really, is the breaks are pretty well distributed. It'd be wonderful if all the breaks happened on a handful of streets, then we wouldn't have as big of a problem as we have. But you can look back on the map. We have water main breaks through every section of the city. Certainly there are areas where we have more frequent breaks, but it's pretty widespread. And you can see the numbers, we vary anywhere from, 20 to 30 water main breaks per calendar year. In addition to a water main break, we have to shut off water for 3 to 8 hours, generally speaking. It depends on the break. So if customers lose service, we have cloudy water, and the cost of the main break itself is in the range of $5,000. When you consider the man hours, the equipment, the restoration that's needed, the pavement, putting everything back. So that gives you a little bit of context of what does a water main break mean. There's a cost, but obviously there's also putting residents without water for a period of time, and the cloudy water issue as well. So main breaks are a constant issue for us. We see a peak usually in the heat of the summer, as well as the coldest time of the winter months, or at least when the frost depth is its deepest. So February-ish, if we have a real cold winter. A couple winters ago where we had back-to-back harsh winters, we actually had water services freezing, which is the line that serves your house, which was never seen in Berkley, I'm told. So as the cold temperatures hit and the frost depth deepens, that's where we see a peak of water main breaks. And then in the heart of the summer, we usually see a peak as well, because when they turn on the pumps to supply all the water main, the pressure gets increased, and that causes the mains to rupture as well. So, The other piece to this is upsizing the current water main pipes. So we've got 50% of our city is 6-inch main, and we've got 8-inch, a little bit of 10-inch, and also some 12-inch. The 6-inch main, we really need to upsize. You don't see new projects being built with 6-inch main anymore. 8-inch is the minimum size. So we really have a need to upsize the water main sizing, and that deals with fire suppression needs and other factors as well. So it's not just the breaks. We have a need to also upsize the water main. So water main breaks, here's a couple of photos. The one on the left, they've just finished a repair. The one on the right shows you a rather large water main break, I would say. That size of a hole will blow out the road pretty good. You can see what happens is that the pipe is deteriorating, sometimes from the outside in, sometimes from the inside out, but this is basically cast iron deterioration. The rusting of the pipe. These cast iron mains are very brittle, and they also collect a lot of debris on the inside, which they show a photo of as well. Here you see another picture of a water main break. This hose is actually our big vector, our big sewer machine. So it's trying to keep the hole dry as they make the repair. What's interesting here, this is another very large break. So this would result in a fair amount of pavement that we have to replace. A lot of times we see breaks and they're longitudinal cracks or potholes. These are some pretty good size breaks, and you can see it's right next to an area that's already been repaired. That's a saddle that's been put over the main previously, and so you see we're working right next to it again. I mean, that's just, some streets we seem to just, it's all saddles or it's all repair areas. So you see here that they're going to be cutting out a piece of the pipe to repair it. But these are just a couple of photos to show you what the main actually looks like. Percolation. So this is the buildup of sediment in the water main. So I'm sure we're all shocked, but this is the inside of a water main pipe. This is iron sediment that builds up on unlined cast iron pipe. It's very common. It's all in the area. This is what we have. But you can see why when we have a water main break or when we turn valves, why we get cloudy water, because we're breaking up these iron sediments and they get distributed into the lines. Now we flush mains and we do things to try to alleviate that. But this is the inside of a pipe. Now what else does this do? In addition to discoloration, this reduces your effective diameter of your pipe. So this 6-inch main, per se, could be considered more of a 4-inch main. So you've lost some fire suppression ability because of all of that buildup. So the pipe has exceeded its life. We really have to start looking at replacing it. I'm going to transition now to roads a little bit. And water main and roads go hand in hand to some degree because obviously the water main, in most cases, is underneath the road. We've got all the services tied in. So if we were to do a water main project, we'd be tearing up a good portion of the road. In most cases, we have some instances where I've got a water main, for instance, along Coolidge here on the west side. It's not serving residents directly. It's more of a transmission main where I could replace that main. I need to push that main north all the way to Webster to create a loop. I could do that project without impacting the road. But in most cases on our residential streets, if I'm replacing the water main, the road is going to get torn up and we're going to have to do something. Now, something can mean a lot of things. It can mean reconstruction or rehabilitation, and I'll get into more of those definitions later. But so we want to think of these both. I mean, these are two components funded by different funds, but they sort of work hand in hand, and we need to think about them both when we're doing a job. So focusing on water, 70% of roads need some type of maintenance or repair. I have a slide coming up that shows you where did we get that. Evaluation, we do a road ranking of all of our streets every 3 years or so. You'll see those results shortly. It's called a PASER rating. It's a very just 0 to 10, 0 to 100 scale of how that road rates in comparison to others. So it's just a way for us to get a quick and dirty evaluation of our roads. Excluding Coolidge, we just overlaid Coolidge north of 12. Some of the 12-mile projects downtown, the last major road repair was completed more than 10 years ago. As Matt alluded to, Berkley's history has been save, and then do one job, big job, every 10 years or so. Well, it's not sustainable. From a water main perspective, that's very worrisome to me, because if we've got 50 miles of pipe and we just saved to do a half mile of Harvard, I mean, if you do the math, we're not going to get through this thing. Even if I replace a half mile a year, it's going to take us 100 years to get through the system. So we have to start thinking about that, because our system, all of it, is quite old. It needs attention. Minimal number of roads rehabilitated in the last 5 years. Again, rehabilitation is more of an overlay type project. Before I arrived in Berkley, 2006-ish, I believe, there were some roads, a handful of roads that were overlaid. When you overlay a road, you lose a little bit of the curb. You're just basically throwing asphalt on top of it, so that's one of the downsides to it. But it does give you an instant result at a reasonable cost. Our current focus right now is really more maintenance versus rehab or reconstruction, and that's simply because we don't have the funding mechanism to do more. I'd love to do a reconstruct every year, but the road money, the Act 51 money that we get, by and large I use for winter maintenance, salting and plowing, a little bit of spray patch, which is better than cold patch, but the same kind of thing. You've probably seen it. I can fill holes with it. A little bit of tree work, some signs. That's what I use my Act 51 money for. It's not a pot of money that I can go do reconstructs, at least not short of once every 10 years. So I want to get, that's a little bit of context of how the funding works. Here's the PASER rankings that we've done the last 2 times. More or less the same numbers, as you can see. Again, we did these in 13, and then again, most recently in 2016. A couple of real changes. We redid Coolidge. Some of the fair roads are going to fall to 4. So this is a pretty good context of what we got. And so 30% of our roads are in good condition, and the rest are probably in need of some attention to varying degrees, with anywhere from 12 to 15% being considered poor. Now these are just generality terms, but it at least gives us a sense of what we're dealing with. Now, this is not terrible. This is not terrible, but I think we have to pay attention to this in context with our water main as well, because all that's going to happen by delaying maintenance is we're going to keep pushing more here as time goes on. So consideration for current and future needs. Water infrastructure. So right now, our water sewer rates that we pay, and I think we're second low of the surrounding communities, just so everybody knows that. Bingham Farms, I think, has the lowest. There's a calculation, and we can share this with you, that's done to figure out, if you use this much water, how much is your bill. I think Bingham Farms is the absolute lowest, and Berkley is second low. Of all of our neighbors, 15 communities around us. So we have very reasonable water rates. And I think the main reason for that is because we don't have a capital component in our rates, like many of our neighbors do. They have a specific line item, if you will, that addresses capital for new water main. Berkley has not done that, and I think that's something we need to move to as well. I know it's not easy dealing with water and sewer rate increases, but I think the overall solution to this is probably a mix. It's probably a little bit of water rates. It's maybe a discussion about a millage. It may be a mixed bag when we talk about solutions, but there is some room there to do some increases and help support this. Reconstruct versus rehabilitate, and I think I've got a slide coming up that'll get into that detail a little more. We've alluded to that a little bit. Reconstruct is very expensive, but you're essentially building a brand new road. Rehabilitate or resurface, we can do a lot more of those. But again, that has its pluses and minuses. Rehab doesn't always solve the drainage issues. You start to lose the curb, which starts to mean other problems start to present themselves. So we'll talk about that a little bit. And again, a sustainable funding solution. We got to do something more than once every 10 years. In the water main, the breaks are going to continue. That problem's not going to resolve itself. So we've got to figure out a way of doing something really every year, I think. So here's the slide about reconstruction versus rehabilitation. And this is focused on roads. So you see on the left, reconstruction. This is what we're planning to do for Harvard next year. Half a mile, $2.3 million for a new road and new water main. So it gives you a context of costs. A lot of money for a half mile. But this is sort of doing everything. This is the big cost. We can do a lot of other solutions, less expensive than that. But Harvard is going to be kind of an example for us to say this is going to be a reconstruction, all new water main. We're upsizing from 6 to 8, so that's a good thing as well. As you go down, not required for all local roads. We have plenty of local roads that don't need to be reconstructed, so we would look at other opportunities to keep costs down if we had to replace a water main on a road that necessarily didn't need it. It is more expensive. You can see the lifespan, 20 to 30 years in a brand new road. Yes, it will be more disruptive to residents in the construction zone during those, whatever that is, 3 or 4 months it's under construction. It will certainly be more disruptive. But then again, you will have very little maintenance, at least to start. We believe there is no such thing as no maintenance. You always want to pay attention to something, just like you change oil in the car. You always want to pay attention to the road and what's happening. But very little maintenance, obviously, for a brand new road. Rehabilitation, so this is like a resurfacing. This is what we did on Coolidge north of 12, although that's a major street, not a residential, but that was a mill and overlay. We ground off, this much asphalt and put back some asphalt. It looks almost like a new road, but it's a much lower cost, and this can be done, but this always doesn't work with every scenario. Most of Berkley is concrete roads. And even the asphalt ones, I think, are primarily asphalt over concrete. So we have a lot of concrete streets. So an asphalt overlay, for instance, yeah, you can put it on top of one, but again, you start to lose your curve. They deteriorate relatively quickly, but it does give you sort of an instant satisfaction. But it's not a long-term thing. 10 years or less for a lifespan is probably even being a little optimistic, but you can certainly gain some life. Short-term project, it'd be very quick to do one of these. There's really little inconvenience to the residents. Asphalt can be put down and driven on the same day within a few hours, so it can be used right away. But you still need ongoing maintenance. Even a new asphalt road, like even Coolidge, I'm going to have to crack seal very soon. Reflective cracking will happen on that road where the pavement underneath moves a little bit, and you get reflective cracking that comes up. Now, if you seal those cracks, you're in good shape. That's sort of the spider web looking stuff that we've seen before. It's worth its weight in gold. We'll save the road. I've been hounding the county to do it. An overlay on 12 Mile that they did a few years ago, and I'm thankful they actually did come out and do it. They did not do it on a piece of 12 Mile downtown that is now deteriorated past the point of any sort of maintenance. It's pothole filling and those sort of things. So it's something to pay attention to. I think that's about it on my end. I know there's got to be some questions, so I can answer some more questions towards the end. But that's a broad overview of roads and water.
Can I just do one thing before I move on? You all have a notebook. We didn't tell you what's in the notebook. So can we just do that really, really quickly? Behind the first tab, you have your membership process and contact which everything you have. There's Robert's Rule of Order, because you're going to have some discussions, and orderly discussions is a good thing. There's a 2-pager on the heavy override that's prepared by the Michigan Municipal, and you have a glossary of budget terms. Under the second tab, you have a map of where the water main breaks down. You also have the water reliability study. That's very good information for you for the water system. On the third one, you have the PASER rating map. You can see which roads are rated the way Derrick had mentioned, a good, fair, full. On tab number 4, you have the excerpt from the Stantech study that is specifically for the Parks and Rec complex. On number 5, you have the Stantech study specifically for the City Hall complex. On number 6, you have a 1-page revenue and expenditure summary. Sabrina is going to go over that with you all in a moment. And then the capital improvement program for the current fiscal year 16-17. Tab number 7 is blank because the community center utilization study is not finished yet, but when we get that, you'll get a copy of that along with the responses. And then you should have some empty blank note paper in there somewhere, and room for the binder to grow, because you may ask for more information later. So before we move on, can I just like give you a little funny story? Okay. So, yeah, I know, because your kids are like exploding. So there's this guy, he's standing on the top of a manhole cover, and he's jumping 17, 17, 17. So a businessman walks by, he sees this guy jumping, and he looks at him and he goes, so what's that about? And the guy goes, 17, 17, 17. So the guy, he comes out of his business meeting, he passed the guy again, he's still going, 17, 17. He said, oh man, that looks like fun, let me try it. So the guy steps off the manhole cover. The guy, the businessman stands on, he goes, 17, 17. And right as the guy is going off, the guy rips the manhole cover. The businessman falls down in the manhole cover and he goes, 18, 18, 18. Okay, that's my comedy break for me. And I'm sorry you didn't laugh, but that's all I got. I just wanted to break the tension. Okay, Patrick, would you please come forward, please? We are very fortunate to have Patrick Calhoun, one of the project managers from Stantech, who actually was involved in the building assessment study, and what he has is really good information about the two buildings that are in question here. He's going to give you all the technical stuff, and then Theresa's going to follow up with some other kind of updates on where we are both at Parks and Rec, and I'll give you some information about City.
It's a wonderful presentation right here, but not there. Just 1 second. Here we go. Okay. My other graphics are more readable than this one. So it just, yeah, a brief history. Stantech, I guess I could say, I'm not a resident of Berkley, actually, in Huntington Woods, but I've worked in Berkley for about 12 years now. We're in a building that's just north of the Taco Bell. Engineers, architects, planners, interior designers. You probably have heard of us. We're working on this school district really nearby and renovating those buildings as well. But in 2014, late 2014, early 2015, we worked with the city to put together a facility condition assessment. This was really looking at the deferred maintenance issues, those things that had to be put off, those things that just happen when you have a building that is either near the end of its useful life or well past the end of its useful life. And that's not saying useful as in it's meaningful. That's all the components that really are inside that building, all the pieces and parts that naturally wear out. We typically think of buildings from the exterior. Those old brick buildings look great a long time past the inner workings, the fans, the pipes, the floors, the roof, all of that can be in really bad shape before you ever notice it on the skin that we usually see. Bricks last a really long time. So we looked at all the buildings, focused really on these here today. We're talking about the goal for what we set out to do was record the condition. Really, it didn't look at the functions that were occurring inside the building, just the condition of the building. So nothing about the revenue side of it, or the ice skating side of it, or the operations of the city hall. Our goal was to record the information, to understand it, to make sure that it was communicated clearly, and then to come up with ideas, recommendations for resolving those issues. We reviewed available documentation, including drawings going back to 1928. We walked through every building, and that was an architect, mechanical engineer, and an electrical engineer looking at each one of these buildings. We interviewed key staff to figure out what's been working, what had not been working, analyze the issues, and then develop these recommendations. So I'm going to start with the community center, and I'll give you a quick rundown of what this means, because there's a lot of abbreviations here. First and foremost, the current replacement value. And this would be what it would have cost in 2014 dollars to just replace the building and its systems. This does not get into site work or fees to hire someone to do the work. It's really just the building, the infrastructure. We use that to help determine what's called the facility condition index. Essentially, this is a nationally accepted standard that helps very quickly determine the amount of problems as a percentage of the value of the building. So when you see a facility condition index of 2.6%, what you're looking at is we're saying right now, critical issues that are top priority, that means immediate, amount to about 2.5% of the value of the building. That's a building that's in good condition. When you start to slip past 5% and into that 5 to 10% range, it really is falling into a fair condition. You better start budgeting. You may not know it's going to break, but you know something's going to need maintenance. When you get over 10%, you're really looking at what's called poor condition. When buildings start to creep up to 25% of their value is things that needed to have been fixed, say, years ago, you're getting into that realm of, do you even keep the building? Is it repairable in that capacity? What we look at is the deferred maintenance backlog. Of priority one would be immediate issues. And then the additive, if you do nothing, in a few years this is going to be where you are. This really looks out to the 5-year range and starts to understand what happens to this building over the next 5 years if everything, I'm a sunny guy, if everything that we think could go wrong does go wrong. My wife's in finance, she appreciates that approach. So in looking at the community center, built in 1970, replacement value of about $1.6 million. It has, big picture, it has structural issues. It has ventilation issues. The roof is at the end of its useful life. And yes, it's a metal roof, but the way it was designed and the way it was built has been problematic and will continue to be so. We did take a look, compared to peer facilities in other cities of this size, it is very undersized. This is one of the few times we looked at that. Just to keep it where it is, probably spending at least $50,000 a year over the next several years, just to kind of maintain it in the condition it's in. And that doesn't count making those major repairs. What we looked at over time is within about 5 years, we expect to see the FCI, the Facility Condition Index, to hit close to 16%. And this was in 2014, 2015, so we're already a couple of years out. What we saw, we see wall movement and cracking at the northeast corner. The structure underneath the ground is starting to shift. Roof, wherever a roof meets a wall, there have been issues of leaks in the past. We've got exterior paint failure from water coming off the building. What that looks like, yeah, it's fixable, but it's going to come back. This is a little hard to see, but if you see that little shiny spot right there, that's outside. This corner of the building has shifted enough that you can see through the building. And again, 1970 insulation wasn't exactly at its highest. This is a single width, single block wall. There's another picture that shows you some of the repairs that have been made over time. We looked at the interior. The finishes are in fair condition for their age, but as all of us who are in their mid to late 40s, things don't work like they used to. They're nearing the end of their expected life. So a lot of these systems, which have been on borrowed time for a while, you probably don't have a 40 to 50-year-old furnace in your house. Some of these buildings do. We looked at the heating, ventilation, and air conditioning systems. It's not providing adequate ventilation for occupant comfort. They're residential scaled units to provide the heating and cooling, and they're undersized for a building of this type in this day and age. Inadequate ventilation to remove the odors that just occur in that building. The electrical system is at its capacity. If any more electrical capacity was added, it would all have to be replaced. This is a code requirement. You can't go past what you've got without completely redesigning the system. The lighting is a mix of different types. A lot of it's more older and efficient. Plumbing, the fixtures, the piping, again, 40 plus years, it's near the end of its useful life. One thing I actually try to say here is a lot of the things I'm talking about aren't necessarily a sign of lack of maintenance. This really is a sign of just an aging building with aging systems. This is another spot where you can see some of the issues with settlement along the facade. I think this is the facade that faces.
No, it faces
Thank you. Where I was headed. That would be Kipling. And roof drainage again is an issue that needs to be addressed.
Oxford, it faces Oxford, I'm sorry.
That's okay. I'll take your word for it. I'm lousy with directions. One of the other things we looked at was energy consumption. And again, this is just for the community center, not the ice arena. So this portion of the building. A larger peer group consumes about 70,000 BTUs per year to heat. Basically, the energy consumption to heat building the community center is, based on your meter readings, about 110. Looking at the balance of the building, the ice arena, we've been following the ice arena in the news and such. Built in 1974, so again, as ice arenas go, this one is definitely the systems, the building. It's of a different era. It's a different construction quality. It is at the end of its useful life. The value to replace this building, and this is with a main ice and a studio ice, because it was the original main ice. Studio ice was added a few years later. This is the largest city-owned building. It is the highest energy use building. The studio ring's not been operational for several years. Before it moved, something occurred that caused that system to fail, and that's been off for a number of years now. The roof on this building is an industrial storage building metal roof, and it has actually exceeded the end of its life. And the building systems, the heating, the dehumidification, the ice system are definitely, the ice system especially, is past the end of its useful life and not functioning. This is again prior to when the main ice failed. There were very few pressing issues like critical must be fixed now. But when we looked out 5 years, the building slipped into almost 25% of the value of the building tied up in major mechanical system, which that building is almost all mechanical system. The building itself was a very inexpensive building when it was built. Deferred maintenance backlog just to fix those issues, probably over $1.5 million. The metal roof has been resealed a couple times in certain areas, but because of the heat above the bleachers, that creates a moisture issue. The moisture has rusted the roof. And that's just the nature of these types of buildings. They're very under-insulated, so it's the same issue with condensation on a glass, except that this is rust. The painted block and the painted metal panels are dented. They're due for replacement, especially at the south end. And I'll show you a picture of that in a minute. Doors, service doors, damaged, rusted, just, again, heavy-duty use over a lot of years. This is on the south side of the building where all the scrapings, the dumpings from the Zamboni are put. And typical of these kind of buildings, it gets beat to pieces over here. This is I believe that is the chiller unit, or is that?
That's the dehumidifier.
Dehumidifier. Again, essentially non-functioning. So the humidity issue has continued to be a problem because of that not operating like it should. We get into the interiors. The interior finishes get a lot of abuse. Hockey players tend to like to get out their aggression after the game. So a lot of banging and such. But painted plywood ceilings, painted plywood walls inside the rink area really are all at the end of their life. Doors, typical damage for an ice arena. This is a little hard to see. It's the corridor that runs under the bleachers. Again, we did find if you were to build this building nowadays, there are just circulation and egress issues that weren't a code issue back in 1974 that would be now. This is a view of the area above the bleachers. You can see some of the discoloration just from the heat. The bag insulation that they installed when this building was built doesn't come close to the insulation value required nowadays, it's about 4 to 5 times what this is. And the design of these buildings had these beautiful pinch points every few feet that squish the insulation down to effectively 0. So again, common for this type of pre-engineered building. And I guess that's another important thing to think about on these types of structures, pre-engineered buildings. The metal framework is very inexpensive. I'm sure you've heard the ads, I can build you a building for $10,000, but that's all you get. You have to provide the concrete and the structural support underneath all of that and all the other pieces and parts that infill it. These buildings were not meant to be, basically not meant to last this long. A couple of the issues while I'm on this slide that I'll bring up, after we took another little look at some of the rink issues after the ice failed and talked about some of the approaches for how do you, if you don't do ice, what could you do in this space? Talk a little bit about, can you do indoor soccer or even volleyball or something like that. One of the issues is the head height, the clear head height space in this rink is actually low. I think it gets down to about 16 or 17 feet at the edge, which isn't an issue here, except you might hit your head. It's an issue on the other side that we took a quick look at. Can you put another indoor sport in here? Soccer, volleyball both require clear of 23 to 25 feet. This building does not have that. We looked at, can you drop? You have to pull the slab out. When you do, the piping underneath has failed, and it is embedded in the slab, and you have to come out. Can you drop the slab and lower it below the rest of the floor? The way these buildings are held together from structural load on the roof pushing the walls out is there are concrete encased cables that run from one side to the other at every one of these major columns. You can't go below those, otherwise your building just goes flat. So it's got limitations to repairability, but they go upward. It's a little hard to see here. This was a furnace that supplied air to the locker room. It is a residential scale unit. It's very old. It's darn near impossible to access. And it's exposed to debris being thrown over the back of the bleachers by spectators. It's too close to a lot of flammable wood. And if I understand correctly, it's at the moment not operational. At least in 2014, it wasn't. It's not operational. The ice arena has inadequate ventilation. The louvers are not closing fully, which causes an issue with keeping the temperature moderated in warmer months. So as you can see, kind of on down the line, a lot of systems that just are not functioning. The electrical switchgear panels, all the main power panels are near the end of their life. Lighting works, but again, is inefficient. A lot of it's older. And the plumbing, the fixtures are, again, original, damaged, and near the end of their life. This is the ice generation equipment. Again, a lot of this is dating back to 2014. It's original, it's inefficient. One of the compressors failed. Parts for the other compressor are difficult to obtain. If the system is turned off, it's difficult to turn on. And then the rink refrigerant piping has proven itself to have leaked and no longer able to hold the pressure of the Freon. And at the time, the studio ice plant wasn't working at all. This is just an example of trying to control some of the uncontrolled airflow in some of the back spaces of the ring. And again, just a couple other pictures of some of the interior and the exterior equipment. And these are really just other things that we observe from a safety point of view. Fire department connection needed to be more clearly visible. The ice plant systems were past the useful life. And at the time, the refrigerant leak alarm needed to be updated, and the city did make those modifications to resolve some of those issues, again, of a 40-plus-year-old system. Your energy consumption here is kind of high. Exceeds the peer group by about 125% for more modern ice arenas. Jumping over to the City Hall building, and this is really a 3-building complex. There's the City Hall, the courthouse, and the old City Hall / firehouse. Right now, we had to break it into three because they were three extremely different types of buildings. The City Hall itself is the single-story building. It was built in 1960. Replacement value at the time of the assessment of about $1.6 million, again, just for the building and infrastructure, not including furnishings and finishes. A fairly low facility condition index. It's a fairly simple building, relatively solid. But after, again, about 5 years, we're looking at something that gets you right to the edge of poor condition. And it really, in this case, gets down to the mechanical and the electrical systems being aging and inefficient. And some of the issues of water out in that parking lot. It is a very flat parking lot, and when it rains heavy, the finance office becomes kind of lakefront property. Has been known to sneak in underneath that window. Newer roof with some minor leaks. The cladding is under-insulated, older style metal panel. It's in good condition because it has been updated, but it is, you'll see in a second, there's some areas that were done in the 70s with wood cladding that's just failed. It's time, it has failed and it's letting vermin into the building. Older aluminum doors. The windows are in fairly good condition for their age, and they are newer. There's a drainage issue next to the parking lot that allows water in during heavy rains. It's also causing the brick pavers that run along between the building and gas station to deteriorate significantly. This is that this yellow. This is a yellow, basically formica covered plywood panel that was a thing in the 70s. It's failed, not just for its color. Coming inside, ceilings are in good condition. The interior walls and floors are in good condition. The doors are, some of these are original. There are some doors that have the older hardware. It's not ADA compliant hardware. Again, minor maintenance issues. The city council chamber, the egress door, you could not build it this way in a new building. It's too narrow for the number of people that need to get out of that space. And you have to, the doorknob is not, again, ADA compliant. At the time, this was also being used as the court. There was an issue, concern about the safety of having a courtroom immediately adjacent to parking with nothing but windows between you. For the city hall building, the systems, the heating and cooling systems are functional, but they're outdated. And they're poorly controlled, so it's hard to keep a constant comfortable temperature in there. The electrical system is in good condition, and the lighting is in good condition, but again, inefficient and nearing the end of life. The plumbing fixtures are in good condition, not fully ADA compliant. And the building has no fire protection, and not a requirement at the time. A little closer shot of some of that deterioration of those yellow exterior panels. The district court, this is an easy one. This was originally a carport for the police cars. It was made into a building in the 70s, and then as basically to house the police until this building was built. Then it became the district court. It's over 25%. Things get in that shouldn't be in that building. It is vacated now. All the systems are passing into their life. The exterior wall is open to the elements. This building, strongly recommended. This building is just coming down. The historic city hall, historic fire hall, really neat building. Dates back to the 20s. It used to house everything. Motorcycle parking in there, fire trucks, police vehicles, mayor's office, city council chambers, storage, you name it. It was all in one building. It is a solid structure. It is a odd combination of load-bearing masonry on the exterior, timber structure on some of the floors, and steel columns in the middle. So it's got a little bit of everything, but it was designed to hold some significant loads. When we looked at this, it really came down to the interior spaces are old enough, torn up enough, and have been modified enough. They're really, the best solution is a complete renovation of the interior, but the exterior is still a solid and attractive building. Again, we're looking at facility condition index out 5 years of about 14%. This gets into a lot of the building really doesn't have a functioning mechanical system for the entire second floor. And what's on the first floor is nearing the end of its life. Asphalt shingles up on the roof are near the end of their life. The brick is in very good condition. There's some stonework that's needed. The wood trim is, again, original, and it's close to 100 years old. It's used for a good cleaning, repaint, rehabilitation. The window units have been replaced at one point recently. They're in fair shape, and most of the doors are in good condition. This is just a close-up of the typical for wood that's been painted and caulked and painted and caulked and painted. It's time for, this is a renovation at a more significant level of work. It's a little hard to see here. This is up on the second level. And just past roof leaks that have damaged the ceiling. The second level is essentially a gut, as it is right now. The floor is damaged, the roof is damaged. The heating system up there is heating only, rooftop units, industrial units. There's really no functioning plumbing or anything up there. It's primarily storage. And some of the storage space up there, the whole kitchen. A good amount of this, or some of this, has been moved. This is, I believe, and that is not the historic historic museum. That again, this was before a lot of the drawings were sorted and relocated. That's the historic museum storage room. You can see the only heat in that room is right there. It's borrowing a lot of heat from down below. Most of the corridors down below, if you've had the opportunity to go through there recently, are not wide enough by any stretch of the imagination for ADA, or actually for two people to pass each other. This is a little shot of the basement. It is a mix of things that are just left, mostly just left over. The system on the first floor for heating and cooling is 25 years old. Level 2 just doesn't have it. The electrical is fed from City Hall. And again, it's near the end of its life. There's an abandoned electrical system here in the basement. Areas of it appeared at the time to be still live. We don't test them. Make me go click my fingers and test. There is insufficient clearance for the active electrical panels. The building is not accessible. The corridor is too narrow, and there is no elevator. It could be resolved. The building is, once you remove a lot of that, when we look at it as a shell, it's got a lot of flexibility inside once you take out the year-to-year modifications over time. Again, most of this is abandoned equipment. This is still in use, and that's abandoned. This is actually up in the attic space above the City Hall. This is the records that predate 1963. So if you have tax records you want to check from somewhere. The attic is used for storage. We recommend removal of all the materials out of that space. There's water infiltration coming into the basement. Level 2 is not occupiable without significant renovation, and this is probably not the place to have record storage. And when you take the entire complex and you look at the energy usage of those three buildings, they're on a single meter, which makes it hard to tell which is really the culprit. It exceeds peer group consumption by 260%. And that does factor in the fact that part of the complex is in operation 24 hours, and I apologize. I do believe that because they're on a single meter, this is also factoring in this building, so that it was difficult to tell. Based on that, some of the conclusions of the observations we made, from a citywide perspective, you're about 95% higher energy use than peer facilities. You've got many building systems that are really just on borrowed time. Convenient, the Ice Arena, City Hall, Old City Hall. There are buildings that do have significant potential. And the recommendation as you approach this is, again, this gets to the water main street conversation, is it doesn't make sense to pave over a water main that also may break within a few years. In these cases, it's really looking at resolve the deferred maintenance and the energy issues at the same time you're improving space use. And it's really understanding how to balance those out. And then work to prioritize those projects. You'll see this chart, I believe, in the report. And this really was us looking at the facility condition indexes across all the buildings, trying to understand which ones really fell into a category of recommended significant repair or sliding into the category of replacement for that particular building. And the recommendations that came out of this were to do basically what you're doing now, and that's to develop an action plan for the municipal buildings, in this case those two complexes, to begin budgeting for system replacement, and then resolve the issues of code compliance, life safety, and collateral damage. And these are the things that really just come out of the age and the use of these buildings over time, and the fact that codes have changed since the 1970s, since the 1920s. So that's essentially where those buildings are.
Thank you very much. But I understand if you guys just want to pay your bills by Dropbox from now on, don't actually want to go in the building. I promise that was probably the most depressing portion of the presentation. It gets a little bit better from here, but we do want to give you guys a little bit of a break. Mentally, restroom-wise, those unfamiliar with the building, the public restroom is actually out this door and slightly to your left there. There is one, I apologize for that, but I do want to give you guys a chance to kind of take a breather and then cycle through that. So we'll be back here in about 10 or 15 minutes, or when we see people sitting down facing forward. Thank you.
Everybody back? All right, why don't we get started again? We're back, Lori.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We heard the structural side of the facilities. Then we're gonna kick over to Theresa McArleton, our Parks and Rec Director, to talk a little bit about what she's doing now with the arena and the community center building.
Hi, everybody. My name is Theresa McArleton. First 19 years of my life, I was a resident of Berkley. I've been with the city almost 9 years now. Took over as Director of Parks and Recreation a little over a year ago. And those are the facilities that we work in every day that you just saw. Note is, if you do come through our facility where you saw the daylight, we did recently, we looked at doing a structural fix to that. And the city decided at this point it wasn't worth it, not knowing what was going to go forward in the future, but we did do heavy caulking, so you can't see daylight at the moment. That is a very sort of temporary fix, but for a long time you really could see daylight. We kind of call it our California back there. So I'm going to talk a little bit about, obviously, with the arena going down this past year, not having an ice arena and having that happen really early on in the season was very damaging for a lot of the teams and for us. We had an operating ice arena for 42 years that suddenly could no longer be fixed. There was a significant leak underneath, and as Patrick took you through, the building really has a zero value in terms of fixing what we have right now. Some of these issues we already went through, and we talked about the coolant leak. Repairs costs are prohibitive. Stantech study says that it's not a practical option to renovate it. Parking lot is another issue that we did not go through, but both parking lots are in dire need of repair. If you've ever been in those parking lots, you know that we do spray patch as often as we can, but again, these are temporary fixes. The city did go through a public-private partnership, which I think Darchelle will talk a little bit more about later. That proved to be unsuccessful. And currently, I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the good stuff that we have going on in the arena, but again, it's sort of trying to make lemonade out of lemons, and that's what we're doing right now. So we looked at this facility that we have that we can't just shutter, or we could shutter the doors, but we do already have some things going on. The small ice, as Patrick talked about, what happened was it was added in 1994. About 10 years later, the floor couldn't hold the ice underground and it caved. so it's not capable of having a small ice practice on. It sat empty for about a decade. Different groups would come in, give us different proposals. The city never saw any merit in going forward with that. And then about a year ago when I came in, met with the Dad's Club, and they gave us a proposal to renovate that space, to pay us a rental fee to use it, and we move forward with that. And we actually do have a contract with that. They pay us a monthly lease. They have turfed the area, they have netting, and it's actually been pretty successful in bringing people into the arena and getting people through the arena. They've had a number of clinics and practices, and we have, a couple hundred people every month using that facility for the moment being. So since we already have that going on, we looked at, okay, we have this other space, what can we do with it? And we had a lot of different suggestions. Some of it was not able to happen. One of the things that people always talk about is bringing a lot of people into the space that we know as the large ice. And the problem with that is there are fire suppression challenges that we cannot have a large number of people in there at one time without ice being there. We won't get into Berkley days. That was sort of grandfathered in many, many, many moons ago by a committee that I think no longer exists, and there are a lot of regulations that they follow in order to have Berkley days in there. So what we decided to do was, we had been approached by a gentleman who wanted to do this sort of concrete urban jungle, bring his own equipment in, and offer these workout classes in the space. We ended up partnering with him, and then obviously people register for his classes like they would for any of our programs. We're doing that currently. His name is Andrew Reese. He has a lot of energy if anyone's looking for a new workout class for the new year. We also decided to do a walking track, walking running track, because that was something that people have talked about wanting to see in the city in the colder months. So we ended up marking off the space and starting a walking track. It's actually proved to be really successful. We've been averaging anywhere from 7 to 15 people a morning, and now we're offering evening hours, and tonight there was about 10 people there when I left this evening about 5 o'clock. So we're excited about that and bringing people into this space, and people have been pretty happy with it being there. The last thing that we decided to do was a teen center. So one of the things that we hear all the time is that there's nowhere for teenagers to go in the city other than the library or restaurants after school and that sort of thing. One of the challenges that we have with the community center we do have, and Patrick talked a little bit about this, is that we have really low ceilings, and so really beyond the age of 9 or 10 we cannot offer kids to use that facility. It really doesn't suit their needs. So we looked at the lounges that we have where we do our fire suppression, we do our heat working, and we sort of renovated those spaces to be a makeshift teen center, but it's somewhere where they can go 3:15 to 6 o'clock Monday through Friday. We are staffing it with appropriate staff, and first day we didn't have any kids show up, and every day since it's been adding numbers too. So I think today we have about 8 kids there. So we're hoping that will grow, and that's kind of where we're at right now. Some of the things that Patrick talked about in 2014. Just to touch on in the arena, we did end up making some of those fixes. We were looking at keeping the arena going, basically as long as we could. That was our goal. We did add a new dehumidifier. We did fix the lights. The lights, we have great LED lights in there right now. And that's where we're at right now. Some of the things that we hear a lot, we recently went through our 5-year plan just a year ago, and out of those meetings, the things that we hear that people want are our teen center. We hear that they want better meeting rooms for our community center. We hear that they want better, like a kitchen banquet facility so that they can use that, to rent that out. We do rent out our facility a lot as it is now, but what we offer is not the same as what other community centers offer. A quote that I like to go back to that one gentleman said at one of our 5-year plans was, he said, when you walk into the community center, it's like you're walking into the Walking Dead. And I don't think he meant the staff, I think he meant the facility. And, I think I walk into that facility every day, and I have a deep, deep love for it, but it certainly, it feels very dated, and it doesn't, I think for what we have, we program really well for what we have. People are always surprised with what we offer, but we certainly know that we could offer a whole lot more, and that's where we're at now.
don't know, my name is Darchelle Strickland. I'm the Deputy City Manager. I have done a lot of things in city government. I have run a government access channel. I've been chief of staff to a large city mayor. I've worked for council people. I've done a bunch of stuff. So I just want to jump into this and not to repeat anything that Patrick said. When Theresa was talking, she mentioned the public-private partnership. We did it for both buildings, both City Hall and Recreation, is to put out an advertisement saying, if you look at these buildings that we have, is there a way that some private entity can come to us, help us with the renovation, and then at the same time generate some revenue so that it would be worth their while, and then at the same time the city would get what it needed, the developer would get what they needed, and it would be a win-win for everybody. It would also be a lower price ticket for the city. Well, we had the P3 out for a month, 3 days? 6 weeks. We had it out for 6 weeks, and we got no takers. We thought minimally that with the ice arena there might be an interest because you could do concessions in there, you could probably do some fitness things that could generate revenue if a party were interested, but there were absolutely no takers. For City Hall, the location was an issue. The location and the size. And that is the issue that we have discovered with grants, with a lot of other types of funding sources, is that we're small. I mean, there's an advantage to being small in that, if you have to fix something, it's not like super big money. But the disadvantage of being small is that you're small. And so the thing that we love about being small is also the thing that sort of hurts us on the other side when we want to do something sort of out of the box. So we've taken that track just to see if we can get any takers, and we were not successful. When we initially received the results from the 2014 facility study, there was a desire on behalf of City Hall to at least start the process of determining what could be done and how much would it cost to do it. So we took on the task to bring in an architect who would help us look at the space that we have, both City Hall and the Fire Hall, and then help us determine what is the best reconfiguration of it. At some point, I hope that you will all together walk through City Hall to see, like with your own eyes, some of the stuff that we're talking about. But one of the things that, when I first came for my interview, I walked down the hall and I was like, where is everybody? Where am I? Things are spread out very inefficiently. Office space, a lot of just wasted space that could be used, but it's not used because of the way things are configured. So we are working with an architect now to kind of help us get a sense of what can be done in both the City Hall space and the Fire Hall to make it more welcoming, to make it more efficient, to improve the environment and all those kind of things. So we are now at a point where we've had some preliminary meetings with the architect. We're going back to talk about function and flow because we have a preliminary floor plan. And we're working through some of those issues. Then the architect will move forward and we will at some point, I'm thinking probably by March if not before, have a good sense of what it's going to cost to do a renovation. We believe that we can renovate the City Hall as opposed to knock it down and start all over. One of the interesting things about the architect that we're using is that they found out that there's some famous architect that designed the building. And we're thinking, okay. So there's some historic value actually to retaining the current City Hall structure, but making the necessary improvements. I'm sorry. So the thing with the buildings, if you look at priority, for Parks and Rec, do you tear it down and start over? Do you replace the ice arena? Do you eliminate ice services altogether and just stick with recreation, fitness, those kinds of things? Do you rebuild the community center? I think Patrick gave you enough information about the structure. I won't take that any further. For City Hall, our questions are, do we renovate it or do we just leave it as it is? I mean, our options are not great without money. So if I had to summarize all of this, we have a lot of needs, and I would dare say that for the staff that we have, they do a very, very excellent job of keeping things running. We are quite good and have become quite adept at doing it. We have prioritized to the point where we can't prioritize anymore. You now got to start going lower on the list to start addressing issues. If you look at how we do what we do, we can't continue to do things the way we've always done. We've got to do something different. Otherwise, what we have is just going to continue to go downhill. So issues to consider with roads and water: should a portion of the fund balance be used for this purpose? And our finance director is going to give you more about what all this stuff is. Is there a way to kind of have a perpetual fund where every year there's a dollar amount set aside for roads and water, and we use that every year to do so many miles of something? Do we do a one-time bond thing? The thing with a one-time bond is that once that money's spent, you got to wait till you pay off the bond to get another bond, so you continue to put things on. And then lastly, do we add a component to the water rates to help handle capital improvements for at least on the water side? For the buildings, things will not go up, they will only go down. Maintenance costs and maintenance activities will increase with age. Both buildings have major structural issues that need to be addressed. And the question is, how do we address them? Do we continue the ICE rate? I mean, that's been a question for at least 10, 20 years from what I've been told. It's not a new question. We're just at a point now where the arena is not operational. So we either allow the building to die or we revitalize it and some other kind of. What do we do with the city hall? The firehouse, which is, it's just like the amazing thing to me. You know, if you look at the building from the outside, it's a great building. It is a beautiful, great building. And on the inside, it could be equally great, but it just takes some work. What's the priority of this? There's always been this discussion: do we talk about roads and water? Is that a priority? Do the buildings, is that a priority? But I think they all are priorities. The question is, what, in what way? What creative way can we come up with to get them both addressed in some way, shape, or form? Can you do all of something, some of something, none of something? How do you get there? So what we're talking about are major capital projects. If you look at the current needs for roads, we're talking $12 million. That's a lot of money, but it's not enough money. That's not enough money. That'll get us started. The question is, how do we start? For the community center, Patrick and I, we talked about, you know, with ice, without ice, 14 million-ish. We need to get a better number for that. To renovate City Hall and the Fire Hall, somewhere between 3.5 to 4 million. And then the total we're looking at somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 million. It's a lot of money. It's a lot of money. But if we don't do something, that 30 million is only going to creep up. So the good thing about this is that this is probably a great opportunity for all of us to be champion problem solvers. And we're actually repeating the brain efforts to help us work through this puzzle that we've been talking about and trying to reconfigure, and if not this, then that, for some time. So thank you for being here, and thank you for listening, because I know it was challenging. So now I will introduce our friends. All about your wonderful person. She really is.
So I'm Sabrina Lilla. I have been with the city for 2 months. Previously, I was with the city of Novi for 3 years, and then before that with a consulting firm of Plain Moran, where we went into struggling communities to try to get them back on their feet. So I've been to Pontiac, Saginaw, Benton Harbor, Highland Park, Hamtramck, you name it, and I was probably there. So coming here is kind of a breath of fresh air where we're financially stable and things are looking good. So biggest issues we have, to me, yes, they're issues, but it could be a lot worse, and I think these are fixable. I wanted to start, hopefully not to put you to sleep, but I know there's some people in here that may not have a government finance background. So I wanted to do just a quick and dirty overview of what government finance is. It is a little bit different than if you were in the private industry, but just kind of a quick overview. So municipalities use taxpayer money. So not only through property taxes, but as Matt alluded to, we get state share revenue. There are also charges for services. We take all of that money to supply services to our residents. So again, that's police and fire, DPW services, that includes all of our salaries. We take that money and we put it into different pools or different funds, and that helps keep the city accountable. So there are a lot of legal restrictions when it comes to some of the money that the city receives. For example, Matt talked about Act 51 money, which is for our streets. That is restricted only for street use, so we put it in a separate fund, major and local street funds, again, to hold the city accountable that those funds can only be used for street services, similar to our water and sewer funds. We don't commingle those with other funds. We keep our water and sewer revenue and expenses in a separate fund. There are different types of funds. So our governmental funds includes your general fund, social revenue funds, which I just mentioned, being your major and local streets, parks and rec, or solid waste, community development, block grant funds. There's also debt service funds, in which we have at least one levy that's left for debt service, where we collect the money and it specifically just goes to pay off our debt service. Capital project funds, again, just go to help fund our capital projects. Permanent funds would be if we had a cemetery or cemetery perpetual care fund. We also have business type, which are a little bit different and work a little bit different than the way our general fund does, but it would be our water and sewer and our ice arena, and then our fiduciary funds, which are pension and our tax collection fund. The one you hear about the most is the general fund, and that is one that doesn't have any legal restrictions with it. That's the one that most people understand. Again, this is where your police and fire, DPW, your clerk, finance, treasurer, all of those departments are housed in your general fund. So you also hear we talk about a fund balance, and what is fund balance? So governments generally report, assets are available in the form of cash. So our general fund tracks all of our expenses and all of our revenues in cash. So we consider funds available for use if we can get to them within 30 to 60 days. So it's a little bit different than the real world, where you may have large pockets of receivables that may take several years to collect. Here we don't consider that revenue in the general fund unless we know we can receive it within the first 30 to 60 days. So assets minus liabilities, which is what we owe, equals our fund balance. It's everything that's left to spend. Can the available fund balance be spent as a governing body sees fit? So the famous accounting answer is, I feel like, it depends. So there are different types of fund balance. So the first being non-spendable, which would be your prepay or your inventory. Again, you can't spend that. You're restricted, so external legal restrictions. An example would be if you received any grant funding, you could not spend that for police services, because that is very restricted for what the grant has said you can spend the money for. Committed and assigned are a little bit that gray area where city council or someone they designate is saying that we want to set aside this pocket of money for the specific purpose. So just this past year, we had some capital projects that we didn't spend money for in fiscal year 16. So City Council would have assigned those funds and kind of set aside fund balance for these capital projects to be spent in fiscal year 17. Everything else remaining in fund balance is what's considered unassigned, and that's what you can spend. So fund balance is used to set the financial health. It tells readers of your financial statements how healthy you are. How much should a community have, again, goes back to that accounting answer of it depends. So a lot depends on the risk tolerance of the community. How low do you want that fund balance to get? You also need to look at your upcoming spending levels. And a lot, to me, depends on the size of your community. So industry standards would say you should be between 10 and 20% fund balance. Here at the City of Berkley, so we typically have $11 million, $12 million of expenses a year, and our fund balance is 3.5. So we're at 31% fund balance to expenditure ratio, which again is healthy, but $3 million in fund balance, which equates to again about $3 million in cash, doesn't get you much. So when I look at a city of Nowhere, where I was previously, they have $12 million in fund balance. I think that again was about 31%. Do a heck of a lot more with $12 million in fund balance and cash than you can with $3 million. So healthy, yes, but again, it depends on the size of your community and what you hope to accomplish with that. The state of Michigan, when they're looking at what determines if a community is in financial distress, they would say anything less than 13% is considered distress. So financial actions. So a lot of times, I believe someone asked is, why does the city have to look at other options to do some of these projects we're talking about? Why can't they use fund balance? And again, we have $3.5 million in general fund balance, which is great, but when you're looking at the costs that Darchelle talked about, they stack up. Even if we did go out for a levy, the general fund could not support debt payments. Debt payments can be anywhere from $400,000 to $1.2 million a year. And again, the general fund can't support that. So on average, again, while the general fund is healthy, we try to maintain a balanced budget every year. I looked back at the past 10 years, and on average, our revenues over expenditures each year is about $195,000. So again, we're not really going to be adding to that fund balance anytime soon. We have stable, balanced budgets, but not we have these big windfalls where we're increasing that fund balance to support these debt payments without additional funding sources. So what are some options? We talked about a debt levy. Again, these would have to be voted on by the residents. So if we did an estimated $12 million for roads, or if we did an estimated $18 million to bond for building restructures. Another option, if we don't do debt levy, is a CIP levy. Darchelle or Matt might have talked about one example is a municipal street levy, where that could be voted in for a number of years. The other option is a 10 to 15 year capital improvement levy. The difference being the municipal street levy, you can just use it for your major and local streets. Again, it's very specific, legally restricted in what you can use it for, where the 10 to 15 year capital improvement levy gives a little bit more of that bigger umbrella of we could use it for CIP projects. So I've been in other communities where they give the definition of a CIP project has to be $25,000 or more, just so they're held accountable to the residents to describe what that CIP is. So pros and cons. So the bond initiative, the improvements can be made now because you're going to be getting that money up front from issuing bonds. You don't have to wait for the CIP's millage to slowly have that money trickle in and accumulate. It's not subject to heavy rollback. Again, we talked about that. I'll get into it a little bit more with the CIP levy, but if we were to levy 2 mills of a CIP levy, that eventually could be rolled back. So we start out with 2 mills, but it's slowly going to be rolled back as our taxable value increases. So the good thing with the bond millage is it's not, you calculate it every single year, so we don't have to worry about that. The cons is that mill rates do vary from year to year depending on your debt service payment. So again, we received some estimates from our financial advisors in terms of what it would cost to bond. And the bond rates varied from $400,000 to $1.2 million in any given year. So again, your mill rate will fluctuate from year to year. Payback of those bonds does include an estimated 20 to 40% interest cost. So you may levy for $12 million, but you end up paying back $16 million. Costs related to building and maintenance, you're paying those maintenance costs in addition to paying your debt service costs, your interest and your principal. And your future generations are paying for your current improvements. So just kind of want to flip the sides and we talk about the pros and cons for a CIP levy. So with the pros, you do have that consistent, predictable mill rate. So if we say we are going to collect 2 mills for the next 10 to 15 years, again, it's going to be pretty close to that 2 mills. Like I indicated, it may be rolled back. We will save on interest costs. So if we try to levy for $12 million, we can collect $12 million over a course of a number of years. We know that's what we're going to get. The biggest pro to me is your current generations are paying for your current improvements. You're not asking those future generations to pay. The cons, which I mentioned, is it is subject to heavy rollback. It's pay-as-you-go funding, so it will take a number of years to accumulate that $12 million that you need. As I said, it does take time to build up those funds. So debt options, how much and for how long? So $12 million, the mill rates, when we asked our financial advisors to give us some estimates, would be 1 to 3 mills, depending on our debt service payment for each year. If you have a $150,000 home value, market value, your taxable value is approximately $75,000. So that would cost an average homeowner, again, his home is worth $150,000, that would cost them an average of $75 to $150 more per year. Cumulative over 15 years, so we asked our financial advisors to give us estimates, so we would pay back the bonds in 15 years. Over that 15-year period, it would cost an average homeowner $2,360 to do that. On the other side of that, what if we were to levy a CIP millage? What would that look like? So again, it would generate $12 million, approximately $800,000 annually. It would be about 1.5 mills per year to the homeowner. So that would cost an average homeowner $113 per year. Cumulative over 15 years, again, trying to keep the years the same, so you can see that. For 15 years, it'd be $1,700. Again, something to think about. If your value is less than $150,000, it'll be cheaper for you. If your value is more than $150,000, we went on to look into what if we did an $18 million bond, what would that look like? So your mill rate would be between 1.2 and 3.3 if you did a debt millage. That would cost an average homeowner $91 to $250 a year, and over cumulative property owner over 15 years would be approximately $3,400. And if we did a CIP levy, you're generating $18 million, it would be approximately $1.2 million per year. You could do a lot with. We're talking renovations. That would be 2.2 mills annually. It would cost an average homeowner $165 additional per year, or $2,475 over 15 years. We did look at what are some other options if we did not want to do a debt levy or a CIP levy. What else could we possibly do? One of the options was to ask for a heavily rollback. And again, there's a little bit more description in your binder, but when we ask for a heavily rollback, we're saying that over the years, our taxable value has gone up so much that our mill rate has been reduced from what it originally started as. So we're asking voters to approve that it be put back to where we started. And that has to go back to our charter max. So if our charter max was 10 mills, We are now below that charter max of 10 mils by 0.85. So even though just 2-3 years ago we voted for the Berkley override, that's already been reduced by 0.8. So that's how it is affecting. Public safety mill has been reduced by 1.4 mils, and sanitation has been reduced by 1.4. So again, we could ask for a Berkley override to receive an additional 3.1 mils to help with services. Another option which we talked about would be that just municipal street CIP levy, where we designate those funds just to go for a street levy. Again, we could only use the money to help support our major and local street operations. The last option, which Derrick alluded to, is review our water and sewer rates and start to build in that capital component into the rate. Again, we're one of the only communities that doesn't build in that piece, and I think we need to start looking at that. So I wanted to give an example of what the mill rates look like in surrounding communities, and the big driver is one mill is not created equal across all cities. So when I was in Novi, one mill would generate $3.2 million. You can do a lot with that. One mill here in the city of Berkley generates $500,000. So you can see the difference of what it does. So over here we're talking, again, Royal Oak, one mill that they levy is 2.4. It's a big difference. So right now, Berkley, we levy 15.8 mils. And so you can see we're kind of right in the middle of our surrounding communities in terms of where we are. So when we say people want to come and live in Berkley because of their low tax rate, yes, that is true, but I think we still have some wiggle room so we can still say we have a low tax rate, even if we increased it a little bit with a CIP levy or a debt levy. So this shows a chart of where we've been over the past few years in terms of just the city of Berkley and their tax rates. We had several debt levies that have fallen off the tax rolls that have caused it to go down in 2017. So if we were to say add an extra 2.2 mils onto what we currently levy, we'd be at 18.8 mils, which again is still pretty reasonable, I think, with our surrounding communities. It would push us, below Royal Oak, but still under Huntington Woods, and in some heights, we look at Clawson Oak Park. Again, if you look, Novi is 10.2 mils, but look where Oak Park is. Again, 37 mils. So again, I think we're still in that range. So again, just put that in perspective a little bit. I'll turn it back over to Matt.
As I alluded to earlier, the running theme in presenting you this information is to get to the question of what is best for Berkley. You see the problems we have, or the challenges we face is more accurate. You see the possible methods for applying resources to those challenges. And so the question remains, what is best for Berkley? Is it a CIP or a debt levy? Either way, we need to go to the voters for the authorization to levy those funds. If an immediate action is needed, and with a lot of our facilities, that is where we stand. We recommend asking voters for a debt levy. Again, that's monies, even after contrasting the pros and cons that you saw earlier, the monies are needed up front, then a debt levy and a bond is the best way to get monies in the near term. If action can wait, like we presented with a $12 million number for roads and water, that is an accumulated number of probably over the course of between 10 and 15 years with an evergreen type fund, one of those roads and street millages or a CIP millage. Is that more appropriate for that type of function? So that's the question that we face now today. And these are the things that are to be determined here. A sustainable funding source for our roads and water is where we need to get to. Are we talking, if we're going to the vote of the people, are we making a case for roads and water paid for under the same amount, under the same millage? Are we talking a roads-only approach for the village and supplementing the water portion through the rates that we pay in our bills? Or are we going for a water-only millage, and then we'll continue to try to find different ways to fund roads? Those are admittedly somewhat lacking, even if you look at what the state is trying to do to throw more resources to that issue. Number two, should the city continue ice arena options? And if not, what leisure services could be offered? I'll pause here for a moment to say that we have a survey that's about to go live, right? About to go live, so we're actually going to get you some help in answering that question by surveying the residents as a whole. It's going to be an electronic survey that's going to go out through our normal means, our e-blasts. We're going to try to have hard copies available at each of our different facilities. We're going to try to get you as much help in answering that question as possible. Do we want to see ICE continue, or do we want to see something new, that community center expand to fill that footprint where the ice arena formerly was, with some, and what different types of leisure services are in there? That's going to affect the price. You saw the asterisk earlier on the price tag for the new community center and ice arena is $14 million, assuming that ice is going back in there. There's a possibility that some other services could be a little bit less, but again, you're foregoing an ice arena at that point. And then last but not least, well, no, there's one on the next slide. Third one, city and the fire hall renovation. Should we proceed? Should we delay? It's about $3.5 to $4 million. Is that something that we feel comfortable asking our residents for near term? Do we feel that is a priority given the other challenges we face? Also, how do we finance capital improvements for our municipal buildings outside of those facilities? And what are the most reasonable next steps? Those are the 5 questions that we hope to have answers to when we get to the March 20th presentation for City Council. I believe that is the end of the information. I know it's a lot. And so if there's anything that has been you've been wanting to ask, we're going to open it up to that portion of it, not just to me, but anybody that's collected here. If you want to pose a question in general to your fellow committee members, we'll satisfy that portion, and then we'll open it up to public comment for any of those that have questions there in the back. It's quite possible questions will be asked here tonight that we won't have the answers for you. But we'll be getting that. Anything that you ask that we can't answer right now, we'll either get it to you in the meantime, or we'll make sure you have that question by the time we convene again. And then we'll get into when the next time's going to be, how often that's going to be. So, Tim, do you want to manage the question and answer, or do you want to just let them fire away?
I think we just let them fire away. I think we'll fire away at you, and I'll start it off.
All right. Then there's a hand behind you.
On the survey, just how long is the survey period going to be, and when would we expect to have the results?
We're going to ask people to get them back to us by January 27th, and we're utilizing SurveyMonkey, so those are going to be calculated throughout, so we don't lose any time. That's why we go a little bit later. We don't lose any time for calculations by having people do it.
I have a question specific to the capital component rate for the bills, I guess. What does that rate look like in neighboring communities? Like, I'm just wondering, what are we talking about, and I guess what would that bring over the course of a period of time that maybe
Sure, and
we're looking at short term or long term?
we may have some better numbers for you very shortly, because we've actually asked our auditors to assist us looking at this, and so I don't really want to give any firm numbers now, but we're going to get those numbers to you. Matt, I think, we were looking at single-digit increases that could support a capital component. Obviously, still supplementing it with some type of road millage to go into that. That's a real general answer, but we're not looking and saying, well, the rates are going to increase 25%. We can still do some of the things. I think it was a single-digit increase that could potentially help support that. So we'll get more numbers to you shortly. That's a very good question.
And to jump off that point tonight being about pros and cons is say that's a single-digit increase for the Berkley component. We are still subject to what's given to us by the new Great Lakes Water Authority, as well as the authority that we're a member of, SOPWA, which is the South Oakland County Water Authority. So we're if we go that route, we're doing it in a world where there's things we can control and there's things we can't control. You may come to a point where cumulative between City of Berkley, SACRA, and GLEWA, the Great Lakes Water Authority, you could be looking at between 9 and 10% in a given year. Because they've already shown that 6% is not outlandish for those two authorities together.
And that increase would still keep us in the lower third of our neighbors.
Because a good part of that's going to be, everybody's going to be under that same, well, everybody in Southeast Michigan is going to be under that same condition. So you'd be moving up with others. Okay, just move. Anything?
Okay, I thought you were going to talk.
So I didn't know if Greg had anything.
Okay, I'm wondering if with this new road bill that's been passed, is there any chance that we will get any money at all for our local roads?
I can give you an official answer, and I can give you a jaded, I've been doing this too many years answer. The official answer is that through increased fees at the pump and through increased registration fees, there should be additional monies for municipalities over the next 10 years. There's not a full implementation schedule until 2021, and it's a legislative, it needs to be approved legislatively. So what the current legislature did was not bind the hands of anybody in the future. Each year they have to authorize that expenditure. Historically, despite what party's in control, they have not shown to follow through on plans like that. So it's a giant, we're all paying the fees already.
Oh, yes.
Don't get me wrong, but it's a giant question mark as far as how much is going to trickle down to municipalities. We'll get some. I do believe we'll get some.
Too. So again, it just depends on how much that actually equates for Berkley.
Well, I mean, it's going to add up with that gas tax plus the fees tax. I've already paid both for you.
But there's a lot of other agencies vying for those funds. There's every local municipality across the state. Every road commission is going to be wanting a chunk of that, and then MDOT has about $2.4 billion worth of work that needs to be done now. I cannot tell you what that price tag is going to be by the time 2021 rolls around.
Communities are third on the pecking order. So MDOT gets to go first and take everything, then the counties, and then the communities.
No, and the implementation schedule from all. Ross, anything?
Yeah, just a couple questions. A couple quick ones. What's the bond rating for the city?
AA.
AA?
Yeah, we have a call with S&P coming up, so I don't see it changing, but yeah.
Is it just S&P or do we do Moody's as well?
I don't see S&P. I think Fitch. I believe we may have a rating with them, but what's that? AA.
AA. Okay. And then, is there any overlap between the city and the county with regards to either road commissions or the water resource commissioner as it relates to improvements for roads and or water mains?
So, Water Resource Commissioner has their own sewer lines within the city of Berkley. It's usually the larger lines that they're responsible for. So we're not maintaining those lines. That would be the only overlap that I would really fundamentally see. We stay connected with them to see if there's other options for us, but really there's nothing for Berkley per se. They maintain their own lines within the city of Berkley.
Okay. And then just two more quick ones. The potential for just sort of layering of funding between, obviously if we went out and did, debt service for $18 million or, $12 million in CIP or whatever it is, however it works. How much of that can be layered with different grants, either federal or state, along with maybe something like CDBG funding for it?
So our CDBG funds are very limited. We don't get much at all. So we really could use CDBG funds. We could look into doing other grants. We do receive a SAW grant. So again, we have to look into other grants available.
I mean, I'd love to believe that the state will do something like SAW for sewers for the water main. But the reason they did it for the sewers is because most communities were lacking on the sewer side, but we're doing capital water main replacement. So we're a little bit of the opposite. We've been sewer-wise been spending a lot more money than that on the water side. But certainly with Flint and the increased attention, something like that could happen. I keep asking that question. I'm not hearing positive answers as of yet. But that'd be wonderful if somehow this coincided with some additional state monies.
And we do have a number of state grants through the MDNR that we used for tennis courts, for different park projects. We're actually applying for a land water conservation grant this year for the Oxford Park property to develop that. That is hopefully going to be substantial. It does require a 50% match, but we're applying for a large number for that. Right, it doesn't address the facilities. Okay.
No, but I mean, speaking more broadly though, as long as we don't have funds dedicated to any specific function, what we can supplement, even if it's park lands, if we can supplement those costs, then that's a general fund contribution that in theory is freed up to be applied to something else. But again, that would have to be general fund.
Or Ross, we could do some sort of overlapping too with our water and sewer rates, increasing that component as well as the debt component.
Okay.
So again, alleviate one or the other cost. So.
And then just one kind of real quick last question. At its height, the ice arena itself, whether it be through teams that were registering to use the arena or whether it just be open skate or whatever it is, was it a moneymaker? Quite
I can tell you for the last 15 years, there's been a transfer in from the general fund.
Okay.
So typically, ice arenas, and even we were this year scheduled to be at capacity in terms of the teams that we had skating. There would still be a transfer in from the general fund. I can tell you that most ice arenas without 2 sheets are not going to be profitable.
Okay.
And the footprint where we're at doesn't allow for 2 sheets because there's a drain that you can't build west. So it is very difficult, even with having, every evening from 5 to 11 scheduled, which we've had for the last several years, and there's been a transfer in from the last 15 years.
Can I piggyback on that just real quick since you're already talking about ice arena? The teams that were displaced, if we were to renovate and reopen, would we even get them back, or have they already basically found homes?
So it's hard to say, right? I mean, a lot of them have said, I want to come back to Berkley, and they love skating in Berkley. A lot of them right now, I'm looking at Roseanne because I know that she's one of the parents of a displaced skater. They're skating at a number of different rates, right? Because by the time when the arena closed, they had to claw and scratch. All the other contracts were set the same way that we had all of our contracts set. Now, they say they would come back, but by the time it would renovate or rebuild, we're talking a couple years out, they're going to have ice somewhere else. They can't rely on that.
Right.
We've already made calls going forward for 2017 out of respect for them because we have long-standing relationships saying you're not going to have ice in 2017 because we start looking ice in February, March. So, hard to say.
What was the dollar amount of the transfer annually?
It varied. I would say between $40,000 and $80,000. Is that?
Yeah, I think one year it might have been as low as 20.
Right.
Yeah, it got up to 80, 90.
I guess just in terms of financing, there's been a number of ideas that have been laid out, but I guess are kind of all options on the table? And if so, I'm wondering, has there been retail value assigned to some of these properties as well? If we wanted to consolidate city services all into one area, if we're rebuilding, would we sell off a property? Has that been looked at as an option?
It has been looked at in the past. My sense is that it's generally met with keep what you have. Don't sell off something like the city owns. With the public-private partnership, we were willing to go as far as privatizing the maintenance and operation of it, but still retain the asset.
I just haven't seen a lot of luck with that, and I could be wrong, and maybe it's just the past communities I've been at, but it seems like they haven't had a lot of luck. I mean, I remember being in Allen Park with their movie studio, and what a hassle that was, and the debt with it, and trying to get rid of that. So, or I look at the Silverdome in Pontiac, being sold for $500,000. So, again, maybe poor examples, but I myself haven't seen.
I guess I'm thinking devil's advocate here. So on the flip side, assuming we decide to keep the buildings and we pursue bonds and things and they all get turned down by the voters, how long do we have in these buildings before they literally fall down? 2 of them now are empty and not being used. Well, 3 of them. So out of the 5 buildings that we looked at, if you count the court building separate from the building, 3 of the 5 aren't being used. So what's our worst case time scenario here as we look at this?
3 are broken, the other 2 don't work.
Worst case scenario is we own more and more toxic assets that don't have a second life, a third life in some cases, and we need to incur demo costs without a phase after that, because the funding would not be there to have a successive structure in place.
Just a general question, as a young family in Berkley, we've been here about 10 years. I grew up in the UT in a small town, and I'm a hockey player, and I hate to see guys ring go, but when you look at Berkley being the 13th hottest housing market in the area, and having spent time in Naples, Florida, which was another hot housing market at one point, at what point what's driving families to come to Berkley, first and foremost? Secondly, what's keeping families here? Coming back here 10 years ago, people thought I was crazy when they said I bought new construction in Berkley in 2006. They don't really say that now. But at the same token, what is keeping families here? Berkley's no longer a stepping stone first house because people want to get to Bloomfield Hills or Birmingham. People are coming to Birmingham because they want to Berkley because they want to grow roots here now, and they're seeing value in coming here. They're seeing the response time in their communities from their police and their fire. What is it that's keeping them here? I mean, you have growing families that are coming here. You have developments in the schools here. Your school systems are going well. But we got to keep people here. An ice rink may not keep people here. But something that you look at, like Huntington Woods has their community center. Everybody always kind of compares things to that. I know it fell through a few years ago. Was it approached the right way? Can we approach it differently? I mean, my daughter's grown. Not necessarily cool. I'm just talking about, the whole, I can't tell you how much I've heard about just the teen center that you guys have going on there, of just like, God, cool. I mean, it's almost like a church that said, here's a room, guys come hang out here. But, if you're going to build a community of families, what's going to keep your families here?
Can I just comment a little bit?
Sure.
I think one of the things that keeps Berkley here is the character. There is a feel to Berkley, if I could use that word, okay? And I think people are perceived as being fair. I think that when you walk the streets, people say hello, and that's cool. I think that when you walk around the blocks, you see nice homes and tree-lined streets, and that's a nice thing for the person who likes to feel at home. And I think that's what brings people here. Now, the fact that our public works guys do a great job taking care of the streets. I've heard complaints about us plowing too much versus not plowing enough or at all. When you look at the parks, they're in very good condition. We take really good care of the roads. You've never heard about Berkley going on that emergency manager list. I think the employees themselves are very, very dedicated to providing really, really good service. And I think people look at all that stuff, and when they experience that, they don't want to fly away. So the thing is, this is our challenge: is what community enhancers can we put in place right now? So let's say we shut down Parks and Rec, which I think is a bad idea. It's a bad idea because your kids have no place to go, and then that creates another kind of problem. It also sends a very, very interesting message about what we think about activity and fitness and those things. So the question is, in my mind, the issue is rather, is not what should we not do. The question is, how should we continue to do something, and what is the something? So I think the creativity in answering that question will be key. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think whether people realize it or not, if we ask them to go to the voting booth, they're going to ask themselves, what is the value of what I'm saying yes to? Is it worth what I'm going to be spending, or is it fall below what I'm going to be spending? And it may not be a dollar cents value, but it's certainly a karmic value, if you will.
That's really our job too, is to make sure that message gets out to everybody.
Sure.
It needs to be expressed to your neighbors, to your community, to your schools, to everybody around you, so that you don't just have that handful of people coming out to vote,
And it's either the ones who are extremely angry and I'm not giving you a dime, or it's those ones that are going, I'll give you whatever it takes, but you need everybody there. So if it's not communicated well, you're not going to get the right response.
Yeah, she just, exactly what I was going to say, just working on school bonds and working on so many different, if whatever gets decided here and what gets moved forward, your communication plan and something has to be more in depth, especially in really explaining and showing, because you're at a point kind of when I think with the school district was on some of these issues, you can't go any farther. You're at a point, you don't have a choice, but it's really making that clear and how that goes. And we're going to have to be real careful in not only communicating that, but when we're looking at the Parks and Rec of what it is, and really being clear on looking at that survey and different things. But the communication is key, and it's not just talking about it, but there's got to be ways of showing. And I do believe with what I worked with the school district and how we did with some things really worked this time. And you're kind of, with the roads and with certain facilities, you're in kind of that same situation that they were in.
I'm going to keep trying to work my way down the table. So, Kaylin, do you have any?
Well, just one last question. The survey itself, you talked about using SurveyMonkey, having some hard copy. I guess how are you managing sample for that? Like, we'd want the survey to make sure it's representative of Berkley. You know, with SurveyMonkey, that makes it a little bit difficult because you don't know exactly who's responding. Hard copy makes that even more difficult. Like, is there a plan to manage that to make sure it's representative?
There is, and I worked with a professor of mine from Open University who does research in statistical methods, and we developed a couple of primer questions at the top that would help us sort of manage to make sure that we're getting a good sampling of that. One is just flat out, and we try to avoid this, but we end up not being able to, is ask address. So we know we're getting a good sampling from across the community geographically. And then we ask size, a household, number of adults, number of children as well, so that we know we're getting a good sampling of not just the current needs for recreation uses, but also helping engage the future needs based on the age of the occupants in the household.
Great.
So those two things help us control for that without getting into a very large census-style information.
I just had a few. Relative to other communities, what are the number of water main breaks that we have compared to, let's say, I mean, I don't know if I know we saw the numbers were like 20 or something there per year, but is that
I've
like
seen
a
studies
lot
on
or?
this, and it's all over the map. I mean, I saw one recently that said, you know, for a community with our miles of main, we should have 5 breaks a year. You know, which just doesn't seem right. So it really, the studies that have gone on that are so varied based on how old the system is and so many other factors, soil conditions and the like. It's hard to get a sense of that. I would say that we're not extraordinarily different from many of our neighbors, although Huntington Woods has a regular annual water main replacement program, and they're smaller size. They certainly have less breaks than we do. Royal Oak has a lot more than we do, and they have a lot more breaks than we do. I don't think we're that unusual for the size and age of our main, to be honest. But there's going to come a point in time where we're not going to be able to fix what's breaking as well. I mean, right now our guys answer the call every single time, regardless. But other communities near us are struggling with that right now, where guys are not, you get paid overtime, but they're deciding not to come in. Okay, well then what happens? That's not a situation that I want to get to. And I think if we continue to have increases in breaks without any replacement, that time will come. I mean, that will certainly come. We're not able to fix what's broken with what we have. We have to start moving towards that. Even though it's going to be small pieces at a time, we have to try to move towards that.
Because I think getting to the education piece after this is all done, but one of the things that I think will be important for the community to understand is where we stand relative to everybody else as it relates to that, a whole host of other factors as to what we're paying, and so I think that'll be good for the communication. When you talked about the full replacement of the roads, you're talking of using asphalt and not full concrete, which is even more expensive, is that right? Or?
We are. We're generally looking at that, although we're not opposed to looking at both. I I mean, there's advantages to either one, and I believe as somebody that's designed these jobs for a number of years, that if you built an asphalt road, you know, with an appropriate base course, that we can have asphalt roads that are just as good as concrete. It's really about what you're building, the full package. So even though, you know, we're all, for the most part, concrete, you know, we could build residential streets and asphalt and be comfortable. I know that's a sticking point for some people because they view concrete as such a premium product. But, I mean, drive through Huntington Woods and all the roads that they've done in the new water main. It's all asphalt, concrete, curb and gutter, and perfectly fine condition. It looks great. But that is a little bit of a hurdle that I can already sense with Harvard is going to be a concern. But I think we're gonna do our best to alleviate those.
Do we know how much we'll save in terms of energy costs once, let's say, if there are renovations done to those buildings? Like, there was a lot of reporting that we're spending way more relative to other newly constructed buildings, but do we know what the actual dollar amount?
There are calculations that can be done depending on where we land, depending on the type of like just compliance with the energy code. If you want to go above and beyond the minimum set by the energy code, and then to what level of renovation we do in those buildings if we're not building new. There are formulaic drivers in those, but we can tell you successfully that we're going to be spending less. We can't tell you exactly how much just yet until we get plans and interiors done.
I mean, if we could get like a general idea, I think that would also be helpful to say, okay, there's this capital improvement cost that's going in now, but it's going to result in X number of dollars saved over the next several years. The only other question I had was, as far as kind of piggyback a little bit on what David had, but the square footage of the different buildings. So, for example, the building, the oldest building, the old City Hall, that's 2 stories. That's a lot of it's being used for storage. But what is the square footage there actually, and what is the square footage of the actual current City Hall? And
The fire hall is roughly 7,500 square feet. The City Hall, currently in use, is about the same. They're pretty close in terms of square footage.
And so the old City Hall, what is being used there?
2 offices on the lower level. No.
Yeah.
2 offices on the lower level and the museum is on the west side.
And the museum.
That's storage.
Yeah, we have our communication director, our IT director. There's a lot of storage area there for like general office supplies, and then there is our IT storage area. Well, it's the garage there. Storage takes up the bulk of it. Same thing's true for the second floor.
Okay.
It's inaccessible for anybody because it doesn't meet means of egress standards. The only thing we can do up there is put files and things like that.
I see. Okay. All right. Thanks.
I have some questions, so I just want to clarify the taxable rates for the city you went over, the village rates. That's just for city services. It doesn't include the school district or the like Oakland County, like the zoo, smart bus.
No,
Okay.
you were right. Yep. Yep. That is just what the city herself levied.
Okay.
We collect on behalf of all those entities.
Yes.
But
Okay.
we include a portion of our own.
Okay. I think when we communicate to, it'll be important to, because if you just use these numbers, it might be a little like, oh, I didn't know we were that low. It's like, you know,
Yeah.
no, we're not that low.
Yeah.
It's good for comparison though, for what we're talking about. But, and then another question. Oh, as far as the roads and infrastructure, do you know, is there any plans for the utilities like consumers, any kind of replacing gas lines down the road or?
Yes, and so for consumers, it's become very aggressive in replacing gas lines, almost to the point of excess sometimes, because it's a significant workload for our limited staff when they do come in. But it's a great thing; they are constantly replacing mains. In fact, for Harvard, as an example, they replaced the gas service earlier this year, and then we're going to come in and do the road. That's the perfect scenario that we'd always like to see, is encourage those private utilities to do their work so that we can come in and do our work and then be done. Obviously, I can't force that per se. I can strongly advocate for it, and I will. But all of those third-party utilities, before we do a big job, we're notifying them in writing, trying to give them a heads up that this is coming so that it's a good time for them to do some work.
Okay, that'd be good. I know I had a coworker who was in Warren, and I think she had her home road ripped off. I think they did like the sewers, the water, the gas.
There is a progression.
Yeah, I
Good
just,
sense.
okay, but yeah, you guys plan that together, okay. The courthouse building you guys are showing, so are you planning on renovating it or taking that down? I was a little unclear.
It's gonna be a knockdown.
Okay.
It was never intended to even be an enclosed structure.
Got it.
It was a carport.
Yeah. And
One of those things, they built it temporarily for one function, and then when they got in, they're like, we'll get to it, we'll get to it, we'll
Okay.
get to it. So this is a recent thing, this goes back, 40 years of this type of use.
then the figures for the renovation of the city hall, does that include just the building structure? Are you looking at internal things like new desks and technology? What's involved in that figure?
We're looking at all of that.
Okay.
And looking to see how much we can repurpose,
Okay.
as opposed to just ripping out everything and starting.
Okay, so it's more than just like the bones and the roof and okay.
And that's why there's some leeway between 3.5 and 4. Like I said, we're very good at repurposing things, like Darchelle said. You'd be amazed at how much that we use every day that actually the court just left behind. So, like a swarm, we all jumped on it and said, hey, this chair is 4 days newer than the chair I have. Let's replace it
That
out.
was me. Although now the chair is sinking, so.
Yeah.
Thinking about that though, on Old City Hall, I had heard about that idea, I guess, at some point, and had heard that there was some contention around that with a lot of people because of the historical museum being there. So I guess as per that, would that include like relocating that somewhere, or what would happen to? I don't.
Current conversation about that particular aspect is to put the museum in the historic park.
Okay, so that would stay as part of it.
Oh,
Okay.
sure.
And then
We-
repurpose the areas then, okay.
Yeah, the museum has a
But
lot of.
that's a kind of a hurdle. You know how the logo.
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean,
We know some of the historical things that what.
Well, as you saw, the museum actually has a lot of great artifacts that they're just limited by space and
Yeah.
just flat out can't show. So having something that tells a better story of our history and does a better job of really celebrating Berkley inside our original village hall is a kind of concept, one of those concepts that sort of goes a little bit past just the dollar figure and says, what does that add to our city?
Sure.
Sure. Is it even feasible to renovate the entire building and move the city services in there and integrate the museum with that?
I'm sorry?
Like like the original city hall, firehouse building, it was even feasible to renovate the entire thing and move city hall in there along with the museum, since it is 2 stories, is that even an option?
I think it would be more expensive to put as many people. Initially, when all functions were in the historic building, I don't think there was as many staff, to be honest with you. And I know for sure the operations was nothing like it is today.
Even with gutting anything?
So we wouldn't be able to do it and abandon the single story building we have there. There would still be need for both buildings.
You need
But-
the square footage.
Yeah, well, we could do a better job of laying out that space to where even city council can meet in the historic portion, leaving the rest for municipal office and the day-to-day functions, so that the resident walking in doesn't walk down a long dark hallway to get to do anything they need to do. They could be greeted by the business part of what they came in for. Roseanne, did you get a chance to?
Yeah, just one quick question on the
Did you have more?
on the cardboard thing. No, I'm done. Are you done?
Yeah, I'm done, go ahead.
No, you're fine. So right now, that was just the offices for the judge, for the court.
Court
It wasn't
staff,
the,
yeah.
it's not, okay.
And the courtroom and the council chamber was the same one.
Okay, right, yeah, no, I knew that. So, and that's coming down no matter what, I mean, you guys already have that plan. Okay.
If we just wait long enough, it'll come down.
You can see the places falling on the ground.
The Teflon along the side is literally rolling up.
Rolling up.
They want to have the permit. Yeah, no, that's, I had questions on surveys and they were already answered, so.
Okay, I typed in.
I think this would have been addressed, but are there any other issues with the water system
other than it's corroding and lines are breaking? Are there any lead mains that need to be replaced?
So, and this was a question that came up a little bit earlier too, so just so everybody has an understanding of the lead discussion. So the city has jurisdiction over a piece of what we call the water service. So we've got our main lines, which is what I was showing you pictures of, and then every house has a small line that connects into that. Of that small line, some of that in the public right-of-way is our responsibility. That can be lead, copper, plastic. And then some of that is outside of public property, and that could be lead, copper, and that would be a homeowner's responsibility. So with our projects, like Harvard we talked about, we're replacing everything in our right-of-way. All the lead will come out. Plastic will probably go back in for the services. But the homeowner still has their piece that they're ultimately responsible for. And for that matter, there's still lead commonly inside the house on fixtures and those sort of things. So, but to answer your question, the answer is no, because we've been doing testing, which is every 3 years, which will certainly change because of wind. But all of our testing numbers that we've done have all been below action level, even though we know we have plenty of lead. Again, it's a difference between Flint changed the chemistry of the water, which in turn caused those issues. We don't have that issue here. We're never going to tap a river to pull our water from something different. So the answer is no. We have no present concerns with that issue, but we're still going to make every effort to replace lead when it's appropriate.
And both roads, and this might be a whole other bag of worms, but the issue of trucks using Coolidge to bypass Royal Oak and their weight limits, has there been any discussion of possibly enforcing those so that Coolidge in Berkley isn't destroyed?
Yeah, I mean,
constantly?
there has not at the present time. What I can say about Coolidge is actually one of the streets that we have. It has its fair share of cracking. In fact, we're going to microsurface it here very soon, which is a real surface treatment. But the cross section of Coolidge is enormous. So if it came to what street should the trucks be on, I would certainly prefer them to be on that than some other road. But we don't have we're not out actively weighing vehicles or doing that sort of thing out on Coolidge. That's something that certainly could be considered, but I think in the broader context, it probably isn't as big of a concern as maybe some of the other things that we've talked about.
So you don't think that the fact that they're using that as a get around or
as a major thoroughfare? I mean, it's not helping things, but knowing the cross section of Coolidge, I'm not worried. The surface is going to deteriorate, but I'm not worried structurally, I guess, as an engineer about that, because I know what Coolidge is. It's got so many layers of pavement on it. It's got a pretty firm structure. I can't say that for other roads, but I can say that for Coolidge.
Can you tell me how many households and how many commercial properties there are in Berkley?
It's a great question.
I know there's just shy of 7,000 residential structures in the city. I think the estimates were like 6,989 this year by SunCog, which is the Southeast Michigan Council on Government. They're an aggregate data organization that collects these things for other local governments. I'm not sure on commercial properties.
400 to 500 is what, from a water meter perspective, I know those numbers pretty well. So 400 to 500 non-residential entities, commercial schools.
And then the sales tax that's collected, is that sales tax that's generated just in our city, or do we get access to all the sales tax that's generated in the state? Does it matter if we buy things in Berkley, or does it matter?
You're helping the local economy, and there's a lot of studies that say that certainly returns far more. From the state's point of view, the constitutional and the statutory revenue sharing, there is a formula that divides up the entire state based on population.
Lane miles and population.
Right. Yeah. And then with regard to the survey, can you put a Facebook post so that we can share that and encourage our friends to do that? Okay.
We're going to make sure every person possible. And we'll ask that all of you share.
Because then it's like I can tell mine.
Yes, it's like the old shampoo commercial. They two tell people, they tell two people,
right.
They tell two people.
Yeah. And then
So what we're talking about right now, and we're still in sort of asking a lot more questions than actually have answers on hand, but community space, meeting spaces, like city council and others, and then the museum and storage on the second floor most likely.
Alright, and that's all I need to know.
I have no question.
Oh, I did want to know, what time are the walking tracks?
It's in the morning from 9 to 11:30, and now we're open at night from 6 to 8. At night is Monday through Thursday, and in the morning is Monday through Friday.
They just posted a good one. Well, if you want to share that.
It's on the Berkley residence page.
I still have no questions.
So any other questions left unturned on what was presented tonight before we turn over questions to you guys on number of meetings and schedule? Mr. Hunter?
Yeah, thank you. I just had a question regarding the history of the ice arena. What drove its original construction? How was it financed initially in the 70s?
The history of the ice arena. From my understanding, it was kind of almost like a barn raising. A community group got together, people that wanted an arena. They then fundraised to get it initially started. I don't know exactly. I know the city gave a portion of it, but it really was like a community group that got together to make it happen. The addition then happened from the city in '94 when they added on the whole part that is north. So the initial structure was really like a community group, but we can get the numbers for you on the city.
Okay. Were there any federal grants or anything?
Not from my understanding. No.
So
Yeah, I mean, it's 42 years, so but I stayed, there's nothing posted, I can tell you.
So if we decide, community decide not to have the ice arena, is there an estimate of what the cost would be for demolition or?
If we decided not to have it, do we know what the cost would be for demolition?
Demolition of the ice arena.
Demolition of it.
So if you convert to open field?
Right.
No, I'm not sure.
No, we're actually, no, we don't have the cost.
No, because we haven't got to the point where we consider
What about even the removal of like say it was not an ice arena, obviously there's gotta be stuff I imagine that has to come out.
Oh gosh, yeah, when we were had other arenas calling us, asking to like basically pilfer, like buy things. And my answer has been that we're not there right now and we don't know what we're doing going forward. But Zamboni's, there's things of value, yes.
That probably costs to remove some things that aren't needed or.
Like
I'm
that's
sure
the
they'll
wheel
do
system for the ice. And you have to raise it.
Yep.
You would have to decommission the building, all the HVAC and all that stuff, all the everything else. Oh, yeah, there's a cost for it.
There's 6 miles of pipe underneath all of that.
Which has to be removed, correct.
Well, if we get to the point where we're talking about perhaps a building in its place, we would need to get those costs figured out. So something we could probably get some estimates on for future meeting.
So what are the costs monthly, just leaving it open right now for these various uses? I don't know if you have a rough estimate.
Yeah, I mean, it varies. I mean, we have staffing costs, utility costs.
I have to look at it as a whole. I look at it by individual line items in terms of salary and utilities. So we can get that for you for next meeting.
Okay.
We haven't looked at it on a monthly basis. Line item.
I would say there's no cost for any of the uses that are going on there now, right?
Just the urban gym, obviously, and then the dad's club pays us a monthly fee.
I have one question, I know my wife's gonna ask me right now. The ice arena itself, in the summertime, the Berkley Parks and Rec has an amazing kids program, kids camp. How is this gonna affect those kids?
I mean, this summer, it'll be used the exact same way that it always has been. I mean, because we never had ice in there in the summer, so we don't have ice now at any time. So that'll still happen. Beyond August of this year, we don't have answers of what's going to go on in the building, but this year, the summer camp will be run the same way.
The condition now is not all that different than what we have in the summer, right?
No, not at all. I mean, You know, I mean, the big
There's
issue with
safety concerns and some days, or something a couple years ago, I don't remember what it was, like, kids couldn't go into this area,
we've done renovations at different times, and that's why we've restricted where they're going. But right now, no, I mean it's absolutely fine. I mean the big issue is it's really hot in there, or it's really cold. So I mean the heating issue is it's actually pretty comfortable right now. But I mean,
hot summer days, it actually feels better outside.
Right, exactly. And they spend most of the time outside around it, but yeah, they use that for their craft space. We have playtime in there. They are in there.
It was basically an 8-month building as it is now. We just took the summers off. It was insulation and so forth. There was no HVAC system.
That was the hardest part for a lot of the kids was that they have no cool place to be throughout the day.
We often bring them to the community center when it's like that.
But it's just one of those ones of looking forward. And
sure.
When you do renovations there, or that the timing of those renovations, does that go for 2 years? Does it go for 4 months?
Sure. Yeah, and our summer camp has just grown. I mean, leaps and bounds, so we need a place for them to go.
It's been a great thing. Yeah, it's done well. So I was concerned.
That just all spurred a question. Has there been any conversation with like the DDA about what they would like to see as well, or like what the business community wants in terms of this? I mean, I realize a lot of what we're talking about affects residents more, but at the same time, if you're talking about things that could be a community center, obviously the businesses have a big piece of that as well. So I'm just wondering how much these conversations may be happening with them as well.
Or we'd like to see the business community participate in the survey, but talking about the DDA specifically as an entity, they're very restricted on where their borders start and stop, and where they can make any investments in the community. So taking it from the perspective of the DDA, no, not really. Because, like I said, they wouldn't be asked to participate in the funding because it's technically illegal based on what accountants tell me.
Right. I guess I was thinking more just from getting their opinion. Go to the Chamber of Commerce, if you will, for an opinion.
Right. And certainly we've got an in with the Chamber of Commerce with us here today. So yes, we'd love to get that feedback from the business community as well. Okay. You want to take over as master of ceremonies for the meeting schedule portion?
Yeah, we need to talk about when we want to meet going forward and what we want those meetings to kind of look like. I think it probably makes good sense. We're kind of thinking 4 to 6 meetings, depending on how much progress we make. And it probably makes good sense to tour some of these buildings. So I've been told maybe a Saturday morning would be the best time to do that. Buildings aren't in use, get in and out. So I don't think it's going to be a 2-hour excursion, but kind of get a good feel for what we're looking for. The presentation was great tonight. We got a lot of photos and a lot of good information, but seeing firsthand is really going to be important to us too. So.
Is there interest in a community tour? If you're that interested in seeing all those, would that be beneficial for the community to see? If they've never been to, people that have been to Berkley, I guarantee you've never been to any of those buildings.
It could very well possibly be true. I think for the purposes of what we're here to do, I think we'll limit it to the committee.
Yes.
That might be something that
when you go to the voters and you say this is
that could be part of the education process.
Yeah.
Absolutely, that's something that we should really consider with them.
Stop to see how horrible this is.
The challenges we face.
The wording, I'm not really going to say. I'll be drunk.
So, well, as far as meetings are concerned, does this time on Mondays work well for everyone? Any issues? Kind of thinking every other Monday. Does anybody have any preferences if we tried to set up a tour on a Saturday morning?
The next 2 Saturdays, I know that I'm out.
I'm sorry?
The next 2 Saturdays, I know that I'm out.
Okay.
I can't do anything the next 2 Saturdays.
Well, then we should maybe look at someplace time other than a Saturday because I think
I know we want to do it.
we want to do it early. Yeah.
Right.
Exactly. So, any other suggestions on when the best time to do that would be?
Well, I mean, if we did this Saturday, I could do after 12.
I think no matter what you said, you're going to have people that can't be
Yeah.
I work in funeral service. Everybody has their funeral Saturday in the morning, so please know that I won't be there.
I suggest setting 2 separate events, and this way people can't make it the first one, they can go during the second one.
That's an idea.
I don't think it's imperative that we have all 15 of us there at one time.
Especially if we can't pick up all of them.
Overwhelming. Yeah.
I don't know, the only concern with an evening tour this time of year with the Historic Museum is that there's not a whole lot of lights up there, and especially in the viewer that actually work. So that might be, I don't know if we'll be able to hit all places in the evening, unless, it's not safe enough to have people up there at night.
You need the sunlight anyway.
I'll suggest
Daylight.
Also, really steep stairwell going to the upstairs,
Yeah.
which is an issue.
I'll suggest that a Saturday morning, and then maybe one either during the weekday, during a morning or afternoon hour. That way, someone's unable to make it on a Saturday, possibly they can accommodate. I don't want to suggest a Sunday on the off chance of the city employees having to be present.
So can we schedule for this Saturday? At say 9 o'clock. Is that good?
Where will we meet?
The 14th.
How long would this?
Meet City Hall.
How long would this take? Anticipated?
I wouldn't anticipate. I don't think it'd take an hour.
Oh. I'll take it out.
Okay. And then we let the community center on this as well.
Yeah, we can do the community center there.
So if we meet
So
here at 9.
Here?
Yeah, are we doing
Let us work out some logistics. What I think will work though is if we meet at City Hall at 9, you can walk you through there, and then get you all over to the community center, and then bring it back. We're gonna see if we can arrange a transportation.
On a Saturday morning.
Yes.
So we're meeting up in here or we're meeting at City Hall?
You're gonna meet at City Hall.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
And what might be helpful for those who cannot come.
I'll have to reach out to you because I'm going to be in Las Vegas this Saturday, so I can send you an email either this weekend or early next week, and we can try to coordinate with whoever else is unable to make it.
Well, Gary might not be able to attend on Saturday either, so.
Yeah.
Perfect. Good.
Perfect. That sounds perfect.
All right, so then we'll tentatively schedule our next meeting. Is there any problem with scheduling on a night as a council meeting?
No, because you'll be over.
So let's go with the 23rd at 6:30.
And how long should we be expecting the next meeting to last? The next.
I would like to keep it to under 2 hours.
Okay.
So I can do that tonight, but
And you said January 23rd, right?
23rd, yes, ma'am.
6:30.
6:30.
It is the same day as the next city, as a city
That's the
council.
council meeting at night?
The city council meeting, I believe, is at 7.
Yes.
The 23rd?
Yes.
I'll do the council meeting.
And then I'll throw out an email to everybody with some future dates as we confirm that. If you have any questions in between now and our next meeting, please send them to me so that we can have a central point of communication with staff. And then staff will either respond to all of us through email with the answers, or we'll add them as an agenda item to our next meeting. All right, with that all said, I guess I should ask if there's any motion to adjourn. Second. In favor? Opposed? Anybody that be opposed, thank you very much.
Thank you.